As many of you know, last year we began a discussion about the fact that Mass General laws requires, but we also felt a strong desire to have a voice from the student population on our committee. And with the work of Ms. Gill and the student government at the high school, they managed to put an election together last year, and Jake is now a full-fledged member of the committee. Just to be clear, for anyone who's unfamiliar with the role of a student representative on school committee, he is 100% welcome to any deliberations. No one can censor his opinion or his thoughts. He does not have a vote on the committee, and when we enter into executive session, usually the student representative is not included in the executive session. It would only be at the vote of the committee to allow it because of the sensitive personnel natures that occur there from time to time. But it's wonderful to have you aboard, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
In public participation tonight, I know of at least 2 people who would like to speak to us. And Charlie had reached out to me about a month ago, and we corresponded. And Charlie's here tonight to speak to us about some concerns with budgetary issues from the state level and how our towns are reacting to it.
Yeah, I think they're interconnected. One is, of course, in Chapter 70. I'm sure you're all aware of how the Senate has different versions I'll call it the new funding schedule for Chapter 70 and the related education expenses. The only numbers I've seen, which were issued from the governor, while they, could say, are fairly neutral for Halifax Elementary in the sense that it doesn't get any worse, it doesn't get any better. I'll take neutral. So that's a lot better than not neutral. I would have hoped that we would have done better through that process, but if we're not going to be some days happy with that. However, with Silver Lake, and it's not denigrating Silver Lake, it's not denigrating the school, it's simply the numbers of the way they came out it isn't helpful. And my hope was that as much as I agreed with the whole concept of working on Chapter 70 and that there are school districts across the state that need more financial assistance from the state than they're getting right now. I think in general what I was hoping for was the acknowledgement that all school districts needed significant material additional assistance, that it wasn't going to be enough to go to the metropolitan areas, it wasn't going to be enough to go to the gateway cities and say, we understand your needs, we're going to be helping you. I think that needed to be felt by all districts. And at least when I saw the governor's numbers, I didn't see that for Silver Lake. As I wrote, this isn't a town, this is not only a school issue, it's a town issue for the 3 towns too. Because if we can't rely on Chapter 78, then we're relying on assessments. And we'll get to that portion in a minute. But I don't know whether, especially now that the houses have different versions, and I don't know that the numbers are significantly different. I think some of the textual portions are different. I'm not sure the numbers are different. That certainly by not doing anything, nothing's going to happen in a reverse situation. And just to have the school or just have the town contact our legislative delegation to say, this is not adequate, this is not helpful, the long-term viability of Silver Lake and other districts that are in the same boat. We need both. We need school systems, the district, all the school committees, and our boards of selectmen, people like myself, finance committees, to go back to our legislative delegation and press upon them that as much as we supported the concept behind the whole work that the House and Senate have done, that this is insufficient. I don't want to take away from those who do need even much more assistance. But I don't want us to be left behind either on the assumption that somehow we're not in need, that our expenses are not going up dramatically, whether it's special ed, whether it's health insurance, whether it's running buildings and maintaining buildings. I think somehow we have to get that point across. It may not change anything, but it certainly won't change anything if we don't do anything. That was number 1, which drives into the second part. before the Chapter 78 package came out, it was apparent, and again, it's not your fault, it's not our fault, that the way the state has been allocating Chapter 70 towards Silver Lake is
We're going to identify potential gaps in the curriculum. You know that we have been using and starting a backwards design approach. We started with training over 30 people last spring. We continued with curriculum mapping over the summer. Some of our departments have new standards that also complicates it, but it's a great time to begin that curriculum mapping and that.
it's just been putting all of us, schools and towns, behind the 8 ball, in that we're getting minimal increases. We'll still be getting minimal increases under this new Chapter 70, but certainly we're getting them now. And we're losing at the other end faster because of the charter school reimbursements and such, let alone that our other expenses are going up. Which means, again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, that we're relying on the assessments from the 3 communities to cover the budget. Each of those 3 communities, Plympton, Halifax, and Kingston, really have to, I'm not sure how the other 2 communities do it in the sense of the normal procedure. Halifax each November starts with a revenue budget to say, these are our expected revenues. Even before we look at the expenses, we look at revenues. And I'm urging the school committee to do the same for this budget for 2021, to say, here are our revenues, here's our, for instance, our expected Chapter 70, here's what we're getting from the solar fields, here's what we're getting from our district tuition and the other sources. And say, what should we expect to request for an overall increase in the assessment? Obviously, because of population changes in the 3 towns, it ends up being a different percentage. It might be Kingston is at 3%, and Halifax is at 2%, and Plympton is 1% this year. And then it's the other way around the next year, or it goes all over the place. In Halifax, for instance, we're seeing our percentage of students drop a little bit every year, but we also know it goes up, goes down, goes around. We're going to start seeing it go back up, let's say 2023, 2024, for several years. So as much as we appreciate the fact that our assessment is a little bit, in terms of percentages increases, is a little bit less than the overall assessment, we know that it's going to come to us at some point. And so the burden on those 3 communities as a whole needs to be looked at in the sense of pick an arbitrary number. Say if we increase assessments by 2.5% or some other number, how does that work out to a revenue budget? And then look at your expense budget. Look at what you know you're going to have to spend. You can make no other changes. You look at your contracts, you look at your employees, you say, here's what we're going to have to pay out. Same thing we do over in Halifax. Contracts, we're going to have to increase this person's step from step 4 to step 5. You do the equivalent. Every single employee, work it out. Know what your increase in retirement costs are going to be. Estimate what you're going to increase for your health insurance, et cetera. And say, okay, here's our expense budget. No other changes, no new programs. What do we got? Is that going to fit within that revenue budget? If not, the only place you're going to be going is those 3 communities and saying, well, we're going to have to go back to you all instead of asking for a 2.5% increase in the assessment. We're going to have to ask for 2 3/4 or 3.5 or some other number. Or we're going to have to cut back and fit our school programs, our school services within that revenue plan. That's what we have to do in Halifax. The equivalent for us is if we think we can't fit everything in, and we think the best thing is to in fact go to the voters and say override. In essence, you'd be saying the same thing. Go to the 3 communities and say, we need more than a 2.5% increase in the overall assessment, or whatever number you're going to pick, and bring us into that conversation. You can get some input from those 3 communities and say, yes, we understand why you're asking for more than a 2.5. We're on board, or we can't handle this because are the same reasons you are. You're going to be looking at major capital expenditures during the next few years. Major as in, we're going to need debt exclusions in those 3 communities. I think the ruse just as a beginner. You have increasing just maintenance costs, the smaller capital budget items that you've been funding out of your E&D account. It's been worth doing, certainly. I don't know how long you're going to be able to do it, but at some point, some of those capital budget items are probably going to end up being part of your assessment. At the same time, at our end, we've got Halifax Elementary, we've got the special ed programs, same as you all. We've got health insurance, we've got retirement, all those things. And we're trying to fit everything and trying to avoid a competition as much as possible to say, we're going to have to take away from you to cover this. But one of the ways of doing that is starting with that revenue budget and starting with those series of assumptions, both in revenues and then expenditures, and seeing, can we meet the needs, can the revenue that we have meet the expense needs we have? If we can't make that difficult decision, either go to the 3 towns early on and say, we need this much more money, or we're going to say, we understand we can't ask for more, and therefore we're going to have to cut someplace or somehow manage our expenses. The Chapter 70 is going to be very important in all that, because when I looked at those governor's numbers, what I saw was an increasing reliance on the assessments right there in those spreadsheets. And I said, that's not going to work long term, which is why I'm push that first point, that we need to go back to our legislative delegation. I hope as other school districts and cities and towns will do the same thing, who, the ones that in essence are not seeing any significant material gains from the packages that have been proposed, and say, we need some help too. We don't need as much help necessarily as some of these other communities, some of the other school districts, but we're not floating in a sea of riches either. So, you're early enough in the cycle, so I'm not doing this message, let's say in January or February, when you've had your budget hearing. I'm trying to get a little bit ahead of the curve and talk with you all about it in October. And so that's my point. This isn't, how do I put this? We haven't done the work yet, even in Halifax, during the revenue budget. We won't work on that until next month. But I think it's important for you to know that we're going to see some limitations because of our revenue structure. I think you may see some limitations on revenue structure, and to ask you to bring us in possibly even earlier than that public hearing to say, here's where things stand if we only do a 2.5% increase in the assessments. Here's where we stand with some other number that you think is more appropriate. Here's what is kept. Here's what is lost between those 2 numbers. So thank you.
Anybody like to respond to Charlie? Charlie, thank you for coming tonight. And I did correspond back with Charlie, and I let him know that I have reached out to our delegation up at the State House. I received emails back from Rep. Lenatra and from Senator DiMacedo back in the springtime, stepping up and signing on to a $100 per pupil minimum increment for our students here in Silver Lake and in Halifax, Kingston, and Plympton. I never heard back, unfortunately, from one of our senators. The last number I heard, Charlie, was that the legislation both in the House and the Senate came through with $35 per pupil for the minimal increment, which we qualify for in most circumstances, not all of them. There is some relief coming through the circuit breaker. They've redefined some of the authorized expenses that we can resubmit reimbursement for. They've also brought some of the transportation for special ed into circuit breaker as well. There is some money coming our way, but it's not what we were hoping for. And to echo what Charlie said, there is no doubt that the schools that were receiving a lot of the funding desperately need them. We have some districts where low-income English language learner students are really suffering because they don't have the resources they need. But that doesn't mean that we also aren't in need, and unfortunately, it seems like the legislation, both sides, the House and the Senate, are leaving a lot of the suburban districts in the rearview mirror, unfortunately. So I'd be more than happy to coordinate with Charlie to reach out to our delegations again as a united front, to see what can be done to advocate for our positions. Not to try and say it's not fair, but say, don't forget about us too. And like we had done in the past in Kingston, we'd be more than happy to work with you, Charlie, in the town of Halifax and come over early on in the process and hear what your revenue projections look like and try and work in the collaborative process with you.
And I expect we'll have a meeting inviting everybody on November 25th with the Finance Committee to talk about that.
Great. Thank you very much. Yes.
Mr. Chair. So quick question. Would there be any benefit for us to take a vote to send a written letter to any of our delegation officially from the school committee, or just do it unofficially for you? I mean, it carries more weight to take a vote. I'm not sure specifically what we would be asking for.
It carries more weight in the sense that I can say upon a unanimous vote of the Silver Lake Regional School Committee, I'm writing you on behalf of. So yes, it absolutely adds more credibility because then it's not just from me as your chair, it's from us as a team.
So I would make a motion that we do send a letter to our delegation. The specifics I'm not sure of yet. I mean, that's something, giving you the authority to go ahead and take a look at what was voted on, because a lot of this stuff is new and it's obviously still in negotiations.
Right. And even some of the data that was published that came from the governor's office, there was some walkbacks on some of that data. It didn't have all the information necessarily in it that Secretary Pizer thought was supposed to be in it at the time. But when the additional data came out, it wasn't much rosier for us. So, do we have a second to Eric's? Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? All right, I will do that for you, and when I do, I will send a copy to our secretary to make sure it can be part of the public record, and I will send it all to you as well. Okay. So next up tonight, Lynn Kopp is here. Lynn is a former member of the Plympton School Committee, and Lynn is now the president of something that's called Coastal SNAP, and she's here to give us a little presentation about what Coastal SNAP is and what a great benefit it'll be to our students. I have some handouts that I'm going to bring around to you now. Lynn, the floor is yours.
So we're a nonprofit organization filed with Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we provide access and opportunity for students with special needs in the community, access to sports. So typical kids have access to town sports. Kids with severe disabilities do not. They run programs through either like a Best Buddies, a Special Olympics, Abilities Rec, the ARC. But sometimes for those kids, those programs aren't in their own towns. And so those kids, after a long day at school, therapies after school, are headed to other places, hour drives, to participate in like an hour of basketball. There are two other organizations of SNAP currently on the South Shore. One is South Shore SNAP out of Hingham. The other one is Hanover SNAP. South Shore SNAP in Hingham, they will take any athletes. Hanover SNAP is just for Hanover residents. So in talking with my vice president, Heather Eddy, she said to me, we're doing this, and she said this to me in March of this current year. So in May, we had our first informational meeting. We contacted corporations, raised money. We had one fundraiser, and at the end of that fundraiser, we hit our goal in order to raise funds to run a program. So in 3 months, 4 moms raised $7,000 to run this program. So now we are starting up a basketball program. Our start date for that is January, but we're also kicking off an open house, hoping to draw some athletes and parents in. We've had a lot of contact out on social media. We partnered with a lot of different organizations. Kingston Police Department made a donation to us as well as Kingston Fire. And so the community does know about us. At this point, I'm here to ask that we can kind of use the platform of the school to get that message out. Part of the program too is that for the athletes, one-to-one mentors are part of that program. It's good for everybody. There really isn't a downfall to this at all. So one-to-one mentors are paired with an athlete in order to participate in the sport that's being run. We would provide all of that training. I have a background in special education, so I would provide all that training to the mentors. So it's a good opportunity for Silver Lake grads who need 40 hours of community service to get those community service hours in. It's also a nice idea. We have been in touch with Duxbury as well. They have sent it out to their athletic director and their teachers that run sub-separate programs to let them know. And we've had a couple of the Duxbury students part of the National Honor Society because they need hours as well as their service project. So I wanted to go through the proper channels to make sure that we could have access to students and kind of deliver our message through the schools.
Go ahead, Eric.
So I have a question. My youngest son and I did attend the meeting back in May over
Yeah.
in Kingston, and it's something I think is awesome to get the kids here in the school involved with. But my question is, so the mentor meeting, will that be in our schools or is it somewhere else?
It's somewhere else. We partnered with Pure Motion Bar in Kingston on Summer Street. She is gonna probably most likely run like a yoga thing for us as well. So we're holding the mentor meeting at the studio there.
Any other questions for Lynn?
I actually do have a
Go ahead,
question.
Eric.
So are you asking to send emails out to the students or like?
So we're asking that if the school, however they deliver information to students, that we have access to that, or if we send it to administration, that they are able to delineate that out to, or disperse to students. I know that the guidance office might have a posting for, community hours and that kind of thing. I have two students of my own at the high school that might want to make an announcement to come get mentors for Coastal Snap, or to reach out to the athletic directors. That's what Duxbury did. So, there might be kids in sports programs that, they play a fall sport, but they want to, mentor a kid in basketball and don't play a winter sport. You don't have to play a sport either. So that's not what it's about. It's really about the connection, to build a community relationship between school and community, because we talk about inclusion a lot of the times in the school, but then we're missing that bridge step in the community. So we are trying to give access to kids with special needs to sports, just like any typical kid. So it would be a Saturday morning, like you take your kid to, or I take my kid to a game, you take your kid to that game as well. So it's T-shirts, coaches, drills, and then I said both to South Shore Snap and Hingham and Hanover Snap. If we have enough athletes, we have a league and we can play against each other. So that would be the bigger goal, that these kids travel just like their peers.
So I think the authorization comes more from our superintendent and our building-based administrators. We can give our support for the program and the idea of allowing this to occur, but I think the ultimate authority and determination of how to send it out actually is an administrative call.
Do you want a motion for support?
I would entertain a motion for support for the SNAP program.
So I'll make a motion that we do support the SNAP program.
Anybody wants to second that? Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
I don't know whether it's easier to reach out to me or, is this including middle school students also?
So the athletes are school age. We say K through 12, but postgraduate students are more than welcome to be participants as well. I've already had a couple of parents ask me that. We're not going to turn away athletes. It's not a drop-off program either. It's, parents are there, we run the activity, and then parents take their athletes home. We're thinking that if you have a very mature middle schooler that wants to be a mentor, absolutely. If you go to our website, we have a form for volunteers, coaches, and mentors to fill out. And part of the mentor process is we ask for 2 references. So it could be like a guidance counselor and someone you babysat for, you're working or whatever. But we primarily like to take high schoolers first as the mentors, but if for some reason that doesn't work, we're happy to take middle schoolers as well.
Michaela, would you be comfortable? with-
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll get in touch and
Okay.
we have plenty of channels that we can get this information out and share with
Great.
our students and help to support the program.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
We're
very
really
much.
excited.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the
Great.
efforts.
Thank you.
All right, and we have one more piece of public participation today, and I will turn the floor over to our superintendent of schools, Joy
Thank you.
Blackwood.
I'm really excited to introduce our new middle school resource officer, Officer Donovan. And Matt joined us 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago? He already feels like he's always been here. So we are absolutely thrilled to have him. Chief Splain has been very supportive of helping us to work with and provide training for our new school liaison officer. It's quite a mouthful, excuse me. And Matt is a graduate of Silver Lake and came through our schools, and he has fit right in, and we are just absolutely thrilled. You remember last year we worked to try and bring in a half-time police officer. At the middle school, we were unable to bring in a half-time police officer, but we are able to bring in an officer for 8 hours a week, supported by Plympton. So we're thrilled to have him. Hopefully next year we'll be able to increase those hours. He has definitely already made some very positive changes in our schools and in our culture. So I just wanted to thank Chief Splain and introduce Matt, and I don't know if you want to talk also, Chief. It's up to you. You're never at a loss for words.
You want the same speech again?
No, cameras.
No, I just want to thank Joy. We have a great relationship between the schools and the police department. We meet on a monthly basis with the school administrators and the police departments from the other towns. Sometimes we get visits from the courts or the probation officers, and we discuss the different issues that we're all facing. Some of the things that we try to cover is if there's a child that had a visit by the police department, maybe the night before, they may have to have some type of care the next day in the schools. Matt will let the administrators here know. Basically, just some basic information is that the police went to so-and-so's house last night, there was some involvement, maybe the child today will need to be handled with care. And that's really all the school finds out. We don't disclose what the incident was or to violate any Corey stuff, but it's just in case the child is acting differently that day, the school knows why. Some of the other things that Matt will be doing is he'll be teaching in the classrooms. He's already been working with a health instructor, doing a law enforcement perspective on vaping and on alcohol. And so the kids get the perspective from the health teacher as to how it affects the body, and then from that, from any legal consequences. And hopefully, because you never know what a kid connects with, whether it's from teacher, a parent, law enforcement. I mean, we're all working together to make sure we develop the minds in the best way possible. So Matt's been interacting with the kids at the cafeteria. He's been going to the dances. What else have you done recently?
Do you do haunted houses?
The haunted house. Then there's a week coming up in November where Matt will be out of here. I'm going to put him through a school resource officer class along with an officer that's being assigned to the elementary and intermediate schools, so they have an idea of how to like the teenage brain works, how to prepare lessons, things like that. So that way he's not up here just going on his own, even though he told me he's making his own slideshow presentations. This way he'll have some basis as to how it should work and how to interact with the teachers, because we want to make sure that we get the best message out possible. So with that, I'm going to let Matt talk.
Okay. Hi, I'm Matt Donovan. I'm just going to keep this real simple. I graduated from Silver Lake, so I'm extremely happy to be back here and having the opportunity to be the student liaison for the middle school here. And I'm excited to build relationships with the faculty, staff, and most importantly, the students. So I'm looking forward to a great year, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
We're thrilled to have you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Officer Donovan, this was something that we've been looking into for a couple of years now, and we're thrilled to see you in the schools and working with our students. And Chief, we can't thank you enough for the good relationship you mentioned. We feel the same way. And to have two of your officers at our schools here on campus now, both at the high school and the middle school, it makes me feel more comfortable every day. And just giving kids exposure to an officer in the setting that we're in, this might be their first opportunity to interact with an officer. And to make it a positive interaction is always what we hope for. So thank you for your perspective, thank you for your work, and thank you for your dedication.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
And for the record, I did have him as a DARE student back then. So I felt responsible that he's here, and you never know, within 20 years, we'll maybe replacing him because of him. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Matt Donovan.
All right, is there any further public participation at this evening's meeting? All right. I will entertain a motion to accept the minutes from our September 12, 2019 regular session.
So moved.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Against? Any abstentions? I will accept the motion to accept and hold the executive session minutes from our September 12, 2019 meeting.
So we're, sorry,
It's okay.
we're catching up here with all the, oh, sorry. Leslie Ann, see, nice to meet you.
Thank you. So Leslie Ann made the motion, Eric seconded. Is there any discussion about the executive session minutes being accepted and held? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Against? Any abstentions? Okay, fantastic. We are now on to our principal's report, and tonight I'm proud to introduce Mr. Stewart. Did I get that right?
Yes, you
We
did.
just met this evening. I wasn't lucky enough to be around this summer when Jim hired him on, but Mr. Stewart is our new assistant principal, is that what we call it?
Yes.
And you reminded me, interim assistant
Interim
principal.
assistant
I wanted to
principal.
call him vice principal. Welcome aboard. I was thrilled to meet you earlier tonight, and Jim's not available this evening, so you have the floor for the
Thank you.
principal's report.
So thank you for having me here tonight. It's a pleasure. I know some of you here from
I'm
the...
so excited you're back.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome back.
Yep, so I was here, 7 years ago as a school psychologist, working at this school actually. So it's awesome to be back. I'm proud to be part of the Silver Lake community again. So thank you very much for having me here. So I'm just going to go over some of the middle school updates. I'm going to start with the student events. We have the New York City trip coming up, which is Saturday, November 9th and Sunday, November 10th. We have 80 students going, including a group from our drama club and 4 high school students that support the drama club. And Mr. Dupiel will also be attending the trip in addition to the other chaperones. We did have, was already mentioned, the Haunted Halls, which was a great success. We had over 80% of the student population attend the Haunted Halls and the dance, which is awesome. There was 100 high school volunteers that came over to help set up. I was part of the setup and part of the whole situation going on, and it was just awesome to see everybody come together. It's always the last minute of how those halls, they don't look like they're gonna come together, and all of a sudden, that last minute comes. The high school students and the teachers that came and supported it as well, that were in it. Officer Donovan was here. He came dressed up as a police officer, no surprise there. Yep. We also, this week, the guidance department has been doing a program, or presented a program to both the 7th and 8th grade classes during the SSR periods. It's the Signs of Suicide presentation that they've done in years past. They met with both grades this year with the hope that next year they're going to start meeting with the 7th grade class, because they've realized that these topics are so important that the 7th graders coming in should really be hearing them, and then they can be echoed in the classrooms through the social emotional learning that we have going on for the 8th graders the year after. So that was this past Monday for the 7th graders and Wednesday for the 8th graders. And they've been meeting with the students to see if they have any questions afterwards all week. So they've been kind of busy answering those questions, and it was a great job. I was there for both presentations. We have parent-teacher conferences coming up, the Pick a Time. It's going to be on November 13th and 14th. We're going to open the Pick a Time on November 3rd at 7 p.m. and close it on November 11th. So we're going to notify the parents through Parent Square on October 28th and November 1st for both of those. We had a donation. So Andrea Lewis, who's an ELA teacher on 7-3, had written a grant to Cardi's Furniture for $1,500 of furnishings for the teachers' lounge. So they brought in. She was awarded the grant. She got the couches and some tables and lamps, a rug, and it's really jazzed up the place, I must say. And it's actually been very popular. The teachers are going in there. It's great to see different team teachers kind of being able to interact because they're kind of usually on their pod, which. So it was great to see that. So that was something that happened a couple weeks ago when they brought that in. And then I also have included in the packets the October 1st class size report. So it provides average class size of the core academic classes of both the 7th and 8th grade, as well as of our elective classes for both grades. It also gives projections of next year class sizes based on current enrollments.
So before we go too deep, let's entertain a motion to accept the donation from Cardi's Furniture, just to make sure we cover all our bases legally. Do I hear a motion?
Make that motion.
Do I have a second? Second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. So traditionally, this is a routine of ours. If you haven't already sent a thank you to Cardi's, could you please send one?
Yep.
That's a great initiative to be taken on behalf of your staff member to do that. Can you please thank them from us for looking out for one another and reaching out to Cardi's and being awarded that $1,500.
Yes,
Fantastic.
I'll definitely do that. We had a card also down in the office that teachers will come by and signing that we're sending off to Cardi's tomorrow.
Perfect.
So we're going to have that.
That covers the intent of our request as well, so thank you. All right, any questions about the middle school principal's report? All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
On to Ms. Gill.
Hello, good evening. I also have a copy of our class size report for October 1, handed out this evening. No major changes from last year. A couple of things that I'll highlight in a second. Our enrollment has actually remained fairly consistent and even from last year. We have 16 independent studies running this year, and I like to highlight that again because that's our teachers taking on an extra prep, an extra responsibility during their teacher course load. So just again, highlighting our staff members who go above and beyond their contractual obligations. Some highlights or changes that you may notice. The new murals class, which you approved last year, we have 39 students signed up to take that, so we're actually going to be running 2 sections of it next semester. AP Music Theory only has 8 students in, but again, that's a class that we run every other year. It's a very particular, small interest group, obviously, but we feel it's important to run it even at that number because it is a special niche for some of our students. You'll notice that semester 2 of journalism is low right now. There's only 3 students signed up for it, but we do anticipate, actually Ms. Cahill's here right now, we do anticipate that journalism 1 is first semester, journalism 2 is second semester, so we anticipate those students will continue on throughout the year. And actually their first publication just came out last week, and it's great, hot off the press.
I was actually thinking I should run out to my car and bring in extra copies for you, and then also, if I can sneak into the main office, I know that the advisor at the junior high, or middle school, sorry, just put out some as well. So I was thinking about going and grabbing those copies, so at the end of the meeting, you can all take a look at both of the programs. And we've been in communication to try to get a little feeder program going, so building up journalism.
That would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. And then our physics class, not our intro to physics, but physics 1, seniors and juniors take this class, is down to 5 this year, which is much lower than usual. But on the flip side of that, we saw an increase in students taking AP physics. And we're running 2 sections of that this year. So I do think that as the physics program grows, we might actually see all of those students switching over to AP, I think, in the next year or 2. So. In terms of school updates, our parent-teacher conferences took place on October 10th. We had 238 parents make appointments this year, only down 1 from last year, so again, consistent with our numbers. As you know, October at Silver Lake is BCA month. It's a time that we as a community, a school community, really try to foster philanthropy and teach our students about the power of giving and supporting members of our community who have won or have suffered, unfortunately, from the battle against breast cancer. All of the money that we raise directly benefits local families who are receiving treatment at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute at South Shore Hospital in Weymouth. Collectively, over the last 6 years, we've raised over $45,000. So I'll have this year's grand total for you at the next meeting, obviously, and I think Ms. Blackwood has some.
We all have a magnet I bought from our Best Buddies program.
Thank you, Julie.
You're very welcome. So it's for your fridge. Or you could wear it like that. You're really creative.
So one of the I think most amazing things about this month is that everybody gets involved. Our athletes, whether they're wearing pink socks or pink bows, or doing a fundraiser at their events. Our various student groups and activities, each of them wants to take on a different fundraiser, and it grows every year. You know, so this year one of the new events is the walk that we're doing, which will be on Saturday. So it's open to everybody. There are a lot of great raffles and prizes that are coming in. One of them is, I think it's a free night stay at Mirbeau. I mean, there's some incredible prizes. And this is, you know, it's largely student driven. So I think that's a pretty powerful thing that our students are doing. And it's our teachers who are really setting the tone for that. And I appreciate everybody's support. It's easy to sort of get sidetracked with it, but I think it's really important that we allow our students the opportunity to plan and coordinate these events. So. October is also when we host our Cultural Awareness Day. This is organized by Ms. Schwier, our sociology teacher. Several students and staff members who have lived or traveled abroad volunteered to speak about their experiences living in different countries like Holland, Italy, Belgium, that was me, Greece, Spain, Colombia, Mexico, Cuba, Taiwan, Dominican Republic, New Zealand, and Ms. Joy joined us as a presenter, and she shared about her experience traveling through Indonesia. Our fall concert took place 2 nights ago. Our new concert choir, which again is a group that the school committee helped us to create, was followed by our select treble and mixed choir, and then our a cappella group Silver Linings all performed. During intermission, our Tri-Am National Honor Society inducted 8 new members into the program, and I'd like to congratulate those students. They are Kara Andreas, Michaela Barrow, Nina Froyo, Andrew Donahue, Connor Hone, Laurel Fallis, Magnolia Kunzelman, and Caitlin Rancourt. So it's similar to the National Honor Society. They're, you know, if they meet certain criteria for service and character and leadership and scholarship, as well as their love and passion for the arts. So it's a big accomplishment for them.
It's great to hear that the arts are being acknowledged in that way.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think this is the 3rd year that we've had our chapter up and running. Tonight is our annual Silver Lake Idol competition. So if we end on the early end, I highly encourage you to run over to the auditorium at the high school and check out our student talent. Last night, Mr. Glass, our CTE director, and the teaching staff of our CTE department hosted the advisory dinner where we had a ribbon cutting ceremony take place to honor the new greenhouse, and then a delicious dinner that was prepared by our culinary students. And then just coming up, some things to mark on your calendars. Our MHS induction will be on November 6th. Veterans Appreciation Day is on November 8th. The program will be slightly different this year. In the past, our veterans have come in and presented to our students. This year, we're going to let them sit, and we're going to do all the work. And our students have been putting together a very special program for them. So it'll be 9:30 to 10:30. It's open to the public. I would encourage you to stop by if you're able to. And our 3rd annual Liquor Day, which was started by Leslie Ann's daughter, will take place on November 27th. And next month will also be our SOS training for freshmen at the high school. That's it. Thank you all.
Any questions for Ms. Gill? Thank you, Michaela.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're on to our school district business officer. Christine's on vacation, so
Yes.
I'm handing it over to Joy again.
Yes, thank you. So Christine's on vacation, so she left some notes for me. I did also want to mention, for those of you who don't know, Lisa Turcotte's also on vacation, so if I look a little more frazzled than usual, it's with good reason. And Galen Thompson was good enough to fill in for us this evening. So if you can just make sure as you're speaking that she understands or sees what you're doing, that would be great. So your financial report is in the packet. As of right now, all the encumbrances are based on the actuals at this point, unless any additional information is available. We are approximately $4,500 in small deficits that should be able to be absorbed within the home categories. Some of the deficits include the middle school, high school curriculum, some PD that was completed over the summer that was not able to be covered by grants. That's $4,477. Nurse's office supplies is down by a whopping $16.79. And tutoring by the middle school staff members, not by outside contractors, is in deficit of $52.50. In other words, we're in great start. Nothing to worry about at this point in time. So everything's where it should be.
Any questions for Joy based on the financial health of our district today?
There you go. Exactly.
All right, great. So we're moving on to our assistant superintendent. Jill has put together an MCAS presentation for us. There is a packet on your desk, but there's also a slideshow here. If anybody would like to move their seat to get a better view or get a little bit more comfortable, please feel free to do so. Jill, the floor is yours.
So tonight I will present on behalf of the middle school and high school 2019 MCAS results. With the help of Michaela and Steve, I think we have the diagram. That's it.
We got it.
Yeah,
We'll accept that.
Are you ready for me to advance the slides from here? But if this doesn't work, I may have to get up. But we're going to try. I like it. Look at that. It's working. So this year, what I tried to do is to not go into as much detail about the new system, because last year we went into a great deal over the new system in an effort to try to explain all the different pieces. There will be a few reminder slides throughout, but I'm not going to go into the same kind of detail that I did last year, although if you have questions, I will do my best to answer them, or to get you the information that you're looking for. So just to remind you that the new system is based on several indicators. It's not just student achievement, it's not just a growth score. If we had enough students in the English language learner category, that would also be part of the weighting of our accountability. And the other for non-high school, so right now we're just looking at how the middle school was weighted, would include chronic absenteeism. The high school, we would add high school completion, and there are several measures for high school completion, including four-year cohort graduation rate, extended engagement rate, and the annual dropout rate. And we receive points for basically making sure that kids graduate on time. If they don't graduate on time, finding a way to keep them engaged in school and to complete, to get their diploma, and making sure that we don't have students who are dropping out and giving up on education. So that's what basically what those areas are about. In terms of the additional the indicators for the high school, chronic absenteeism, as well as for the middle school, is defined as a student missing more than 10% of the school year. So we lose points, obviously, if our chronic absenteeism rate goes up. We gain points if we help it to go down. And we can do that through educating parents about why it's important for students to be in school when they can be, exercising common sense. We don't want kids coming to school with the flu. But again, just making people aware that it counts and it matters and it's important for them to attend school.
And Jill, just to put that in round numbers, you said 10% of the year.
18 days.
18 days of absenteeism is considered chronic under the
Yes.
state definition for both our middle school and our high school
Yes.
students. And is that the same number that we use for the elementary as well?
Yes.
Just to be consistent. That's what the definition is currently at the state level
Yes.
for chronic absenteeism is 18 or more days.
Then we also gain and potentially lose points if we see fewer kids taking advanced courses. So the state is encouraging us to encourage more students to take advanced coursework, having high expectations for all students, making sure that students are able to experience, let's say, an AP course before they graduated, if they're so interested or inclined. Again, exercising common sense, we've had this debate before, how many APs is too much, and again, that depends upon the child, their caseload, their interest in those particular courses. There's no one set formula. But what the state is doing is encouraging us to have high expectations for all children. We get points, and there was an elaborate chart that we went over last year with points here and there. But basically, in summary, you get points for each of those indicators for all students, and you get points for the lowest 25% in each of those categories. And then that percentage helps give you your overall accountability category or rating. So this year, for the middle school, they were in the 61st accountability percentile, meaning they performed better than 61% of schools. That includes elementary and middle schools. It does not include high schools at this time. I anticipate that eventually it will include all schools unless they change their mind, in which case I will let you know. So they earned 40% of their target goals, which was classified as moderate progress toward targets. To highlight some of the positive features of the report, there was high growth in ELA in both the all students category and in all eligible subgroup categories. So there are multiple subgroups, but we don't always have enough students to actually have a category. We exceeded the target for students with disabilities in English language arts, and chronic absenteeism declined, so we earned points there as well. Yes.
Quick question. I saw this presentation the other night, but I have a question about this with chronic absenteeism.
Yep.
So that 10.6%, is that 10.6% of all students, or that the average student went from 10.6% absenteeism down to 8.4? Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. You understand what I'm asking?
This is not an average, I think I do.
Not sure I do, but yeah. So what I'm wondering is, it was 10.6% of all of our students
Yes.
that were chronically absent. Okay,
Yes.
got it. And now we're down to 8.4.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
The high growth in ELA of all students in all eligible subcategories is a remarkable achievement.
These are very high standards.
When the state first came out with student growth percentiles, they were supposed to be equally weighted with achievement, because we want to move all kids forward to their maximum potential. Unfortunately, the state has backtracked on that very wisely, forward-looking vantage point. I haven't changed my mind. High growth is what we want from all of our kids, regardless of where they end up on their achievement scores. So congratulations to everybody who took part in getting our kids to that.
So the high school also made moderate progress towards their target, scoring slightly more points in terms of accountability, but you'll notice the accountability percentile is only at 44%. Again, this was the first year that the high school took the computer-based test. 100% of their students participated in all 3 tests. They met the target for the 4-year graduation rate. And advanced coursework completion improved for all eligible subgroups. So it's not just about getting kids to sign up and then failing. It's about signing up and successfully completing the course that you gain points. And so we did well in that area as well. And that helped us with our points. Yes.
Is advanced coursework defined, or is it the next
Yes.
level from where the student would have been gone?
There's kind of a category of types of courses that the state will consider as advanced coursework. AP, for example, is part of that. Partnerships with colleges for college credit would be another example. It's not necessarily just, I'm going to take the most difficult, it's not that sensitive of a system that we could say, this is advanced for Jill. This is advanced. So again, good point, we want to be pushing kids to that next level. It may not be honors or AP for every child, but making sure that we're pushing them to do their very best and to challenge themselves at whatever level that they may be at that time. Yes?
So, as someone who's really well versed in this data, I just have to comment about the percentiles, because I was disappointed when I saw the percentiles. And we know that this data is not the be all and end all of measuring our school. but it is how the state measures schools. And, you know, I think about Silver Lake High School, and I think, you know, we're certainly in the top half of high schools in the state. I think we're, you know, one of the best.
It doesn't feel
And
representative of
it
all these
doesn't.
wonderful
And so,
things going
you know,
on.
and that makes me feel sad as someone who, you know, who knows the data. And again, it's not the be all and end all data, but I look at those numbers and I think that doesn't really represent what I know to be true about our schools. So, you know, speaking as someone who works with this data, but I'm just, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, you know, if people look at this data and think, boy, that's disappointing, you know, it really doesn't tell the whole story, but it is what the state, you know, puts out and uses to sort of rank and compare schools.
It also gives us something to focus on and to consider as we look at the data more deeply in terms of areas where we can improve, and making sure that we're making decisions that are research-based best practices, and making sure that we look at what areas we may not be as tightly aligned as we maybe should be, those types of things. So there's a whole number of things that, something like this, you know, we take a look at it and we carefully look at the more detailed data to try to make some mindful, appropriate decisions to move forward to help us to improve. But what we don't want is anything drastic or rash, because we've seen how that goes in the past. When standards first came out in the 90s, and schools were, you know, cutting bands because they wanted the kids in math and English all day. I mean, I don't know that anybody did that, but there were reactionary consequences to the initial release of the standards, and we don't. That's not what we want. So we want to be thoughtful in our approach. We want to take them seriously. We're going to work towards continuous improvement because that is the name of the game. You're always going to have a lowest 25%. So we need to get into the business of moving all kids forward and helping all students to succeed and having high expectations for all students, wherever they may be.
That's say one more
Yes.
point to that. I just wanted to say that I really, the advanced coursework completion improved for all eligible subgroups. I think it's great that our barrier to entry to some of those advanced coursework doesn't exist.
Right.
I think that, you know, having grown up in the 70s and 80s where kids were tracked, you weren't often offered those opportunities, and I really want to say that if ideally anybody can step into an AP class and dip their toe, it's really great.
So, and let's see, so growth, this is for the middle school, and you can see nice typical to high growth here in English language arts for lowest performing high needs, all students. And again, typical growth for math for all students, lowest performing and high needs. Then we have the high school, and we have low growth in our categories for all students, lowest performing high needs. In math, we have typical growth, very low growth, and low growth. And remember, they're being compared to students who scored similarly the previous year. And so what we're going to look at a number of things as to why this may be and ways that we can address it. One of the ways that we address it is making sure that our students are being challenged and that they are exposed to the same standards. So we don't have separate tests for separate levels. And we have a number of levels at the high school at this time. We need to make sure that we find a way that all students have access to those same high expectations, because they all have to take the same test at the end of the day. So that's something that we'll look at. And I'm not suggesting that we eliminate all levels. I'm saying that maybe we have far too many levels, and it's time to consider maybe collapsing some of those levels to make sure that, for example, what's actually taking place is inclusion, that we have special needs students that are in an actual inclusive setting, and not something that we call inclusive, yet is predominantly special education. So we have to be careful of some of those types of things that may be occurring in certain areas. Because I know that everyone is working hard, and I know that people are dedicated to these students. I don't doubt that for a minute. But again, I don't think this is reflective of what's really taking place in the high school. I know that they're working hard, and there's a great deal of love and devotion to the students and the school. But it's setting that bar higher, I think, is the next appropriate step for us to make sure they all get there. So the categories, just to remind you, is no longer advanced, proficient. It's now, it ranges from not meeting expectations to exceeding expectations. Those are the new categories. And Massachusetts educators did work. There were teams of educators who worked with the states to set the cut scores. In particular, for grade 10, they set an interim standard, because this is the big switch over from the legacy to the new MCAS Next Generation. So in particular, cut scores were set for grade 10 ELA, grade 10 mathematics, and grade 8 science and technology and engineering. So those were the cut scores that relate to Silver Lake Regional Middle School and the high school that were defined this year. This is a familiar bar chart that we've looked at before, but again, the categories are different, but it is presented in the percentage of students by category. And you'll notice at the middle school, 60% of students are meeting or exceeding the state standards versus 52% at the state level. In mathematics, 60% versus 49% at the state level. Again, outperforming the state. But again, we can't be complacent with the achievement. Remember that in order to get those points, we have to make sure that each year we meet the target set by the state. And if we don't do that, we don't get the points, and then we move into a category that's not so good. So it's a little bit different than the way it used to work with MCAS, where as long as you had a certain number of students who were advanced or proficient, you were in a pretty good spot. This is a far more complicated system that is about meeting the new expectations each year and improving every single year. So it is more complicated.
Jill, does this new formula have built into it the same problem that Texas faced when they had every single year you needed to show continuous improvement and growth, and eventually the best performing districts in the state could no longer show continuous improvement and growth, and a lot of them got taken into state receivership. Does this have that impossible metric built into it, or is this more realistic, with continuing to push us to excel, but in an achievable way?
So I think it will for a while. I think like any test, eventually it will outlive its usefulness and potentially its, for lack of a better word, predictability. Or can help me with the proper data term.
No, I think that's true. I think one of the pieces that is built into the system is that if you're learning at a certain level, you get the points, even if you don't continue to improve. So if schools are at the 90th percentile or above in a particular area, they'll get the on-target points even if they...
Once they reach that maximum.
Yeah, like even if they drop a little, as long as they're sort of still up there. So I think that does get away, like that does take away the problem with the cliff that used to exist. The other thing is that the old cliff was the same for everybody. Like, you know, they wanted all students to be at proficiency, and now they want every school to say, well, where are you now? We want you to be a little better next year.
So it's more custom
So
to
it is, it's much more custom. So I think those two things make it a little bit better system than like A by B, which, you know, was just a big nightmare.
And from my perspective, having worked in the MCAS system since the 90s, so I've seen a lot of data related to the MCAS, not as much as Laura, but a lot of MCAS data. And I have to say, I think one of the features of this, which is very different, is that for many years, school districts that had a particular socioeconomic status could enjoy relatively high achievement scores, kind of as no wonder schools. And there was some schools still continue to try to push to get all students there, but other communities might have been more complacent with the fact that, well, there'll always be a certain number of kids who don't perform as well. And this kind of takes away that complacency from all districts, because all districts have a lowest 25% that they need to continue to work with and push along. Is there an advantage to high socioeconomic status still? Sure. No.
I just was asking for the sake of those of us who might be here in 2 or 3 years. I was also asking for the sake of our teachers who are going to work hard and analyze this data and probably make some changes, and for our students who are trying their very best every day to put their best foot forward. And I don't want to be chasing an unachievable dream.
Right.
So that's why I asked the question. So your insights help me understand the new formula and how it works better.
So in science, I'm happy to report at the middle school, they are outperforming the state. 60% of students are meeting or exceeding the state standards versus 47% of the state. At the high school, 66% of students are meeting or exceeding standards versus 61% at the state. In math at the high school, 73% versus 58% at the state level. So that's a nice, strong showing achievement-wise in math. And in science, it was still a legacy test. So we remember these blue and red bars from the past. They were at 81% versus 74% at the grade level. Now, we're calling this grade 9/10 because most of our students take this in the 9th grade. There are a few 10th graders who are worked in here, perhaps because they didn't pass the 9th grade test, for example, in some cases, not all. They might have moved into the school year, but that's our 9/10.
Are the students required to pass the science test then?
Joe, do you know when the legacy MCAS for science will be replaced with the next generation science test for graduation purposes?
So they're taking next generation science this, do you know what month it is? June. It's June.
I wasn't January, June.
So this June, so they'll take their first next generation, and then they have some interim standards, and we'll talk about those. That may answer. So I did the traditional presentation, but in my webinars with the state, as they talked about the state data, they really recommended that we present this in terms of average scaled scores because it's a more precise measure. So in the next few slides, you'll see what that will look like. Oh, and by the way, I'm sorry, I advanced, and my slide advancer will not allow me to go backwards, but the state has defined improving as increasing by 2 scaled score points. That's how they defined improving. Now, whether or not that's statistically significant depends upon the size of the school and the sample. So, but we're going with 2 points. Okay. So on the far left is just a traditional bar graph of percent of students by achievement level, which is similar data that you saw in previous, and it's up against the average scale scores. Now we finally have 3 years worth of data, so we can begin to look at some of this as a trend. Be careful, do not read this as a tally column going in the bottom right, because that's not a tally. We're reading it across. In grade 7, we had no change. In grade 8, we had a decrease by 7.1 points. And overall, in grade 7 through 8, we had an overall decrease in 3.7 average scale scores for ELA.
Do we have any idea how many questions it takes to make a difference of 4 points?
Difference of 4 points.
I mean, when we're seeing a change of 4 points from 508 to 504, that could literally be the difference between one question difference, right or wrong, on the entire test compared to the previous
Right,
test.
depending upon your size.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're relatively
Yes.
close
But the
together.
scaling is different every year.
the scaling is different.
So, you know, what, 27 points one year could be one score, and 27 points the next year could be totally different.
And we're comparing two different cohorts of students with each other as well,
Right.
who have their own strengths and weaknesses that are different. Numbers are really close.
So we try not to, again, this is exactly why we don't jump to rash decisions, judge too harshly. We like to watch the data over time, but we also like to take it seriously and try to do everything we can to make sure that what we're doing is going to help the students to succeed.
And all of those numbers are within meeting expectations range, which is where we,
Yes.
want to make sure that we are. So I think that, that's important.
So then this is mathematics. Yes, mathematics. And they also, although we have some nice percentages of students in meeting and exceeding expectations, you did see a decline, grade 7 and 8 overall, of about 3.8 points average scale score.
What's the maximum score if every student answered everything correctly?
So I think I included that. Did I include that in here?
Don't hold it against us educators in the room for not knowing that number right off the top of our head.
Yeah, well, I don't know about some
Right.
They keep changing the number.
I think it's 530.
We used to be
560.
with 280,
560.
now it's 560.
Yes, 560.
But
It's difficult to remember sometimes.
There's a lot of moving parts to this. And so we're hoping that eventually as they work out the, yeah, kind of like they did the first time around. I know it's hard to remember way back then, but we went through this before. We have lived through this before, and we.
Seen this movie before.
Yes. And this too, we shall survive.
That number was realistically unobtainable.
No, we have people
We
with
have-
perfect
we
scores.
have-
Attainable by
We
some.
do.
Oh, I meant to, well, I was going off. You said 90.
Oh, everybody
Everybody,
perfect?
everything.
Yeah.
No,
Nice.
so
I haven't.
so it would be
Yeah.
560 to get
4
the
ELA
perfect
and
score.
5.
Okay, I understand.
One.
Well, it's not really possible.
The test is much harder than it used to be. Like, it used to be, the old system, people could get a perfect score. Not that it wasn't hard, but it was much easier than it is now. Like, it's way, way easier, and way, way harder on this new test to get everything right. And I think you can actually get a perfect score without getting everything right. So that's, yeah, this is the way this is.
Yeah.
Legislative mistake each year.
We did have some perfect scores.
Yeah, which is amazing, because it's a very hard test.
We had nice little perfect scores.
So where am I now? I'm on to science, and I can't, we're not supposed to compare the legacy test, but that's there to remind us that in the past it was a legacy. This is our first year taking the next gen science, and we have 60% exceeding or meeting expectations. That's a nice strong showing for our first go around with science.
There is a strong petition going around the state right now asking DESI to give us exemplars in the rubric that they use to grade constructive responses, which are not multiple choice. It's where students have to construct their responses. So like a short answer or a total response from the legacy, they haven't really given us any indication of how they're scoring. Not like they did in the past. You used to be able to go to the DESI website and click right through and see exemplars of student work. They do for the new one.
Yeah.
When did they put it up?
I don't know. Maybe not for science, but we used to put it in math for sure.
Okay, well, I'm speaking specifically to the science one, they have the 8th grade and
So
5th grade.
maybe, I haven't used science, but I have used the DLA.
So there is a petition going around just asking them to give us some data and information. If you know it, let me know, because there's a lot of people who cannot find out this information.
So just some reminders about this data, particularly with high school graduation and scholarship eligibility standards remain the same as the legacy standards for at least the classes of 2021 and 2022. So people had asked when is this going to start to count. The old legacy standards will remain in place for 2021 and 22, and then after that, 87% of students pass the MCAS requirement in all 3 subjects on the first attempt. This is the exact same as last year. That is not by accident, that was an intentional comparison of the data to make sure that they were in fact similar to that. And when you look at the difference between the average, the legacy scores versus the next generation scores, it will show you just how much they have raised the bar in terms of where students are scoring on this new test. The transition to computer-based testing is nearly complete. Only high school science remains paper-based in 2019. This is English language arts, and here we have 66% meeting or exceeding expectations overall. Nice strong percentage here. And again, we can't compare it. We don't have comparative data. We were taking the legacy testing for this, so this is our first venture. In math, 73% meeting or exceeding expectations. And again, we can't compare it to the legacy test. This is the first time taking this test. So the same way that I asked you if you were part of those elementary school committee meetings where I said, this is the first year, we don't want to jump to any conclusions, those kinds of things. We need to make sure we have enough trend data to, the same would hold true here. This is our first year of next generation math. Physics was the legacy test. 81% scored advanced and proficient. And I wanted to also find for you, I had written down, since it did come up, I think it was, maybe it's coming up on one of the slides. Yeah, it must be. So once again, we have improved in physics in terms of overall the number of students meeting advanced and proficient at 81%. I thought I had the numbers for English and math, and I believe, do you recall, Michaela, how many scored perfect in English and math? We
4
had
in English, 5 in math.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention that, and I said I would. Thank you. So again, when we put this data together, I first arranged to meet with the principals individually and with the coordinators because we wanted to take a look at the overall trends and think about some thoughtful next steps as to what we could do. We're going to review subject, grade, and student level data. What we want to make sure is that for our students who are struggling with this test, we want to make sure that they earn their competency determination. We're going to create plans for them. The educational proficiency plans for some students are required if they did not pass the test. And then in other areas, even if they did pass, some still require educational proficiency plans to make sure that they are graduation ready. So the individual student data is important for us because we want to find out how we can assist these students. We also want to look at the lowest 25%, and it's not always who you assume it's going to be because the formula is a little bit more complicated than just you had a low score in English or a low score in math, or you may have a low score in one but not necessarily in the other, or you may be at risk because of any number of pieces of data that the state collects on students. So again, this lowest 25%, you have to be in the school district for at least 2 years in order for, so it's not just students moving in for the first time. In order to be part of that lowest 25%, they have to be in our school district for at least, this has to be at least their second year in order to be counted. Backwards design approach if you have to do it anyways because you've gotten new standards. And so we're working very hard, but unfortunately curriculum development is at least a 5-year process to do well and to do right. So this isn't a quick fix. But the reality is we need teachers to sit down and to talk about what's most important for students to know and be able to do, and to create engaging, authentic learning experiences that are performance-based in order to determine whether or not they have met those standards and have greater insights, but that's a long-term project. But I've seen teams of teachers look at sets of questions before and say, we need to spend more time on this, or, I really don't do enough on this, what do you do? Your scores were really good on this, what do you do? And sharing best practices in that way. It's also hard because sometimes teachers will say, we spent so much time on this and there was only one question on it. And the test has been changing so much. So that can be frustrating too, but they are able to look at the data and pick out some of those areas that they may want to spend additional time on, or to share best practices as to what may be working in another teacher's classroom. And incorporating research-based practices to help all students learn and grow. And we kind of mentioned this with the idea of true inclusion and making sure that all students have access to those standards.
Can I ask you a quick question? Maybe a very unlearned question, but it would seem to me we'd also want to learn from other districts that have high growth. Right, did I say that correctly? Growth, not necessarily achievement, right? It's different, yeah, thank you. So confused. I guess, is there sort of inherently set up some competitive nature to this? Because if you look at growth scores, you're really looking at the differences between the rest of the larger cohort and how you did compare to them last year. So is there some reticence in the larger community for sharing how they might have achieved their growth scores?
I don't find that to be so in our professional communities, and Laura and I have been on some similar professional communities in the past where Laura has come and spoken to assistant superintendents and shared her data knowledge about the state, and assistant superintendents get together and talk about what they've done that's worked. There is, I have not come across that. That's not to say that that doesn't exist somewhere, but the reality is that research-based best practices, when implemented appropriately, are pretty widely known. The difficulty is getting people on board to make those necessary changes. So it's not so much that we don't know what works, as much as it can be complicated and it can be time consuming, and it also deals a lot with mindset. The reality is regardless of what we do in a classroom, if I believe you can't perform at a certain level, it's very unlikely that you ever will. If I believe that all of the students in my class can get to that point and truly believe it, then there's nothing that could stop that, is there? And this goes back to ancient times. You can watch Pygmalion. We talked about the Harvard study where they brought in a heterogeneous group of students and told the teachers that the students were gifted, and of course, guess what? They performed beautifully. If you like theater, watch My Fair Lady. It's about our expectations. So much of it is about our expectations. So again, I cannot undersell how important a growth mindset is for our students, but also for us as educators in terms of making sure we're setting high expectations and finding ways. And I'm not pretending for a minute that it's easy, because it's not. But it's important and rewarding work too. So, and I think when people begin to see the results of their efforts, it's all that you need.
True, and let's be honest, we have to have that same mindset at home.
Yes. Well, and it's, the reality is I'm going to call myself out. I've said to my children a number of times, good luck on your test today. It has nothing to do with luck. It has to do with effective effort. It has to do with preparation. So, part of it is our own learned behaviors and our own self-perceptions of ourselves. I'm good at this, I'm not good at that. And sometimes it's our heroes. Sometimes studying the failures of others who persevered can help us.
And meet the needs of our students to the highest degree possible. We currently have 2 finalists for superintendent. We did have 3 finalists, but 1 finalist did take themselves out of contention for some personal reasons that I don't feel need to be divulged at this meeting. But there was an apology for any time taken from our...
Too. So if you look at someone like Michael Jordan, you might think it was just natural, or that it was easy for him. But when you see some of his work and he talks about, maybe it's my fault because I made it look too easy, but it was all hard work. And people don't want to believe that, the amount of effort and time that goes into being that great. And then you can learn from people who failed time and time again and then ended up being some of our most iconic contributors to society. But being able to pick yourself up and try again despite that. And so those are the kinds of qualities that when we talk about social emotional learning, that I think all students benefit from and all students need. And that's something that we have to continue to grow and develop. And I do it myself as a parent, so it's not about judgment, it's just about self-reflection.
Paula?
I've got two things to say, and I don't want to like add another layer, but I guess I am. First of all, about parent participation, I know when I used to go to parent-teacher conferences, and my children did well in the school. Many times the teachers would comment, it's the parents that the kids are doing well or okay that we see, and the parents of children that maybe are struggling a little bit that we don't, and that's very sad. Every parent should attend parent-teacher conferences. Secondly, and this is kind of muddying the waters, and you don't have to respond, but I know we survey students. I think my son, who just graduated a year ago, just got a survey. Do we bake into any of this, and this is necessary, it's mandated, et cetera, and it's very interesting data. Do we layer on top of that the consideration of what the kids, they've been out of school for a year or two, what their surveys say, and I don't know exactly what questions we ask, about how we prepared them for their first couple of years out of school. You know, the success is a bundle.
I know that John does some survey data, and I also know that the state has been collecting data, although the state data is limited, I think, and at least at one time it was, to students who go to state schools. So we can't really track the students who go off to private institutions, but the state does have some information there. And part of the problem, part of the reason why we went to this new next generation test is because the original MCAS really told us whether or not the student was ready to graduate. And what they were looking for that was a test that was more indicative of whether or not they would be college and career ready, which is a different correlation. And so that was one of the selling points for this new testing system. But I do know that the commissioner in some of his speeches has been speaking about looking at other ways to measure the effectiveness of schools and creating pilot programs for schools who want to look at other ways of measuring the effectiveness of a school system. Because this is, as much as this is a complicated measure and may correlate with college and career readiness, I don't know that I know that it doesn't capture everything in a school. And, so I'm interested to see what kind of piloting programs are produced and where that may go. It's a different era under new leadership, and I'm not trying to pretend that I think MCAS has gone away. We have invested a lot of money in the system. And I think accountability and standards have helped in some ways to kind of make sure that kids in all schools at least get a minimum expectation of what kind of quality education goes on there before the standards movement, whether or not you believe in standardized testing or this test in general. You could get taught dinosaurs for 3 years in a row, but no one ever got to rocks. And believe me, I loved dinosaurs for 3 years, and I probably wasn't as interested in rocks, but someone has to teach the rocks, right?
father-in-law would be so impressed. Your t-shirts.
So the standards movement forced us to make sure that if you're in this grade, you're going to get this curriculum. If you're in this grade, you're going to get that curriculum. And before that, it was, wonderful things were happening and teachers were talented and helped students learn and grow. But there was disparity, especially from community to community. So there's, how about a silver lining?
Perfect. Thank you, Jill.
So additional steps, high school absenteeism went up a little bit, so they lost some points there. Middle school went down a little bit. We have been working on cell competencies. We continue to work on 2 additional cell competencies this year at the building level. They are working on relationship skills and social awareness. And we have been working on curriculum mapping and understanding by design, which is planning with the end in mind. So what do we want students to know and be able to do, and from there plan your lesson. Yes?
I have a question you might not be able to answer, but by any chance did the absenteeism travel up with the students going from middle school to high school? Do we
Could it be the
track it?
cohort of students who had some high at the middle school,
So if they're
then come
chronically
here?
absent in middle school, is it likely that they may continue on?
continues.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know that we have looked at that particular data just yet, but it's certainly something that we would be able to tell by comparing and seeing where the greatest number of absentee is.
Yeah, that just would be interesting to kind of know.
Could it simply be that there were 2 or 3 rounds of the flu going through the school system?
That could be too. Last year was a little gruesome.
There you go.
Good point.
So then the department heads also met with us and they came up with some things that they were going to be looking at in terms of in grade 8 ELA in particular, they're going to be looking at star reading for practicing online reading comprehension testing. The high school is exploring a schedule change to build in support. They're considering things like a freshman seminar and academic options where students provide targeted assistance. It's not a study hall, but it's an opportunity where students can get help from their teachers. This schedule change came out of some of the NEASC recommendations that happened last year, and Michaela has assembled a team to look at and try to prioritize what they want out of their schedule and whether or not changes are necessary and desired. So they're looking at this with a completely open mind as to what could we gain, how would that work, what would be the unintended, maybe unintended consequences of those changes, but making sure that it's the priorities that are leading the schedule and not just what we've always done. So they're looking at it with a critical eye to see, can we do better, and if so, what would that look like? And we have to consider increased opportunities to collaborate and support students identified in the lowest quartile. They will be getting our attention, and again, this lowest quartile is going to change. So that's not a static group of students, that is an ever-changing.
I think the one thing about the lowest quartile, and I know that you know this, but the state's lowest quartile, you have to be here 2 years to be in the quartile.
Yes.
But we don't only help students who have only been in our school district,
Right.
For 2 years or more. So that, the whole lowest quartile thing has never really made sense to me because,
just to clarify, we're going to help all students.
Yeah, no, I know. But I always think it's strange. And also the lowest quartile is based on ELA and math together. But if you have a
Yes.
student who's very strong in ELA and not as strong in math,
They may not need
they're going to
help.
get support in math. They're not going to not get support because they're not in the lowest quartile.
Right.
So the fact that the state does that has never really made sense to me. But I guess they have to measure it somehow.
I think it's because they want to keep us constantly looking at whoever might need assistance, as opposed to saying there'll always be some. And then I think the other thing is that they're trying to anticipate saying, they just moved in, how can we be
Right.
held accountable?
Right. So accountability and
Right.
what
I
we
think
do
those
for
are the two
students are different.
motivators.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
It's
but-
not a perfect system. I think we've already gone over that the legacy graduation and scholarship standards would remain the same. And this was the slide I was telling you about. Here you see the legacy, see how many, and this is the state. This is the state 2018 compared to what happened with the next generation tests and how few we had in these areas as compared to the old legacy tests. And the same with mathematics. So I thought it was a good visual just to give you a sense of across the state, this is a dramatic change in terms of the categories that students are in.
Gordon.
The difference between the meeting expectations and partially meeting,
Yes.
is that basically just,
That's a cut score set by the state.
okay,
And it changed, for example, it's an interim standard this year. It could be a different set of numbers next year.
okay. With a different subset of the curriculum?
Different set of questions.
Different questions.
Different
Yes.
questions,
Most of the-
but broken up differently
We
with,
could ask questions based on different standards from
Yes.
that curriculum. So
Catching
they don't
French
guarantee that if they have one question on geometry one year, they will also have a question on geometry the next year.
or
Well,
10
but
questions.
There's always, like, it's usually a rough, like on math, it's like 20% for
Yeah.
each of the general high-level standards, but, they might
The
have.
strands.
Yeah, the strands, but it might be different from year to year. So like, it's generally the same, but, there's always gonna be that one question that's very different than the year before.
And again, Laura, they got better over time with that because there were some years where it was
Right.
wildly out of balance.
Right.
But they did get better towards the end of the legacies.
Not that much
So
different than SAT.
regardless of this point system, if we do certain things, regardless of what they throw our way, so if our curriculum is aligned, if we're using research-based best strategies, if we have high expectations of all students, if we develop growth mindsets, then regardless of what they throw our way, we should be able to thrive, continually improve, and meet the next level of challenges. What I don't recommend is that we necessarily try to play the numbers game. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what who the lowest 25 are, we still have an obligation to meet the needs of all of our students.
No, I know.
So,
Are you allowed
Good
to
job.
ask?
you're welcome. And these are just in
Questions
case you're interested.
to the students?
These were the old legacy passing scores. These are the next gen passing scores, but may require an educational proficiency plan at the lowest end. And then the next gen passing and met the MCAS graduation requirement scores. Those are the numbers there. But those could change.
And so there are students who received their CD
Yes.
even though they were in the not meeting expectations
Yes.
category this
As
year.
long as they have an educational proficiency plan, because remember the state wanted 80. They didn't really say this in the webinar. I don't know if you tuned into the webinar, they just said that they did it. But it seems to me like they wanted to make sure the same number of students.
Yes, that's definitely what they did. Yeah, that's definitely what they did. But I think everyone assumed that not meeting expectations was gonna be
Would
the
mean you
cutoff.
couldn't get your grad, yes.
Right,
your
but that's
diploma.
not the case.
But that's not what they did. So.
The state knows how to avoid lawsuits.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
No,
so
thank
much.
you.
You know how much time it took to go through this and how many other people were involved in analyzing this data. And I know the job has only begun, so appreciate your stewardship of our students and putting this into perspective, that this again is a single test taken over a couple of days, and it's a snapshot of our students. They could be having a great day, they could be having a terrible day, and this is not a pure and true reflection of who they are as a person, but it is important data that we can use to improve our instruction and education here at our schools. So thank you, Joe.
We'll go shut this off.
Absolutely. Steve, do you need the projector?
Are you able to ask?
Okay, all right. So it is now time for our superintendent, Joy Blackwood, to take over the floor. Joy?
Thank you. And I apologize, I know tonight's a long evening. It is difficult to try to fit everything in when we get MCAS as well as all the important pieces that fit together for our budget. So each year as we begin the budget process, we usually invite some very important people to do presentations. So tonight we have Steve Pello, who's going to talk about technology in Silver Lake and the impact on the budget and some of the upcoming changes, additions that he's made. He doesn't have a PowerPoint. If everybody needs to stand up and stretch, I think Leslie Ann might have the right idea. So
Come on, everybody.
We're
Let's do it.
listening. But we're listening.
We are listening.
We're listening, we're just moving.
We're moving.
I think I'm bringing my own chair pad next time.
Yeah, there we go.
Good evening. For those of you I haven't formally met yet, I am Steve Pello. I'm the tech director for Silver Lake and Superintendency Medium 31. I'm going to speak both to Silver Lake and the tech department as a whole because I tend to think of it as a one piece, even though it doesn't apply to every district. For those of you who aren't aware, we have 5 people in our technology department. Myself as tech director, we have Jim McKendy as our network administrator, and then we have 3 techs. They're broken out. We have 1.6 techs equivalent at Silver Lake. We have 1 full-time at Kingston, and then we have 0.2 for Halifax and 0.2 for Plympton. As you may or may not be aware, technology is now really pervasive in the schools. If you look beyond the learning and just look at the buildings, technology runs our HVAC systems, it runs our security cameras, it lets people in the doors, it runs our phones, it even reports our gas usage for the gas company. All of that runs on our networks, all of that is part of our systems and infrastructure. If you look at the devices we manage on the system, as a tech department, we manage over 7,000 individual devices. And that's not talking just computers, it's talking the wireless access points, the individual cameras, the phones on the desk, the access control panels and the people in the building. So as a technology department, we maintain all of that. And I like to think we're small but mighty. To share a little story, before I was hired as the technology director, Joy and I met at MassQ. And we talked a little, she mentioned she was looking, and I was actually looking at the time for something down in this area because my mother-in-law was down here. And I told her, you know, if you're looking for someone to sit in an office and just push papers, run things, do budgets, I'm not your person. She said, that's not a problem, and boy, was she right. And to clarify, both myself and Jim McKendy, who is our network administrator, we don't just sit and I do tech director stuff, he does network admin. We're always out there doing repairs, troubleshooting as well.
So you just had the anniversary of meeting Joy because MassQ was yesterday.
Yeah. Was that 8 years ago, Steve?
Yeah, 8 years.
Could you just tell the committee what MassQ is?
Sure. MassQ stands for the Massachusetts Association of Computer Using Educators. They put on a big conference every year where they run hundreds of different sessions tailored to everything you can think of in technology. They run some specific ones that are geared more towards tech directors, more towards, say, network people, some from vendors explaining new things. But most of them are truly focused on the teacher and teaching teachers not only how to integrate technology, but if a teacher looks, they might see a session on using storyboards digital storyboards to engage students in literacy. Some of the bigger focuses this year were more on the technology and engineering pieces, using some of the snap circuits so students learn the concepts of designing electronic circuits.
And it was a terrible venue, I heard.
Pardon me?
It was a terrible venue, I heard.
Oh, yeah, it's horrible.
Where were you yesterday?
What?
Where were you?
At Gillette State.
That's good. Okay.
And it's 8 minutes from my house.
So I'm sorry I hijacked your presentation, but I just wanted to bring into light that not only do you not push papers and you maintain over 7,000 pieces of equipment, that you also have the mindset of an educator. And I want to make sure that that's clear to everyone who sees your work I think sometimes we take for granted what you've done and how you've built this district into what it is now. There's no one who knows you who doesn't respect you. I'm ready to hear the rest of your presentation, but I wanted to acknowledge the fact that you are a true educator as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now I'm going to turn right and get embarrassed.
I'm sorry.
Right, I'm sorry. One thing we did this summer that we had not done before is we actually brought in some summer help at all the districts. These were some students who had graduated Silver Lake that year. Some of them did the AP courses. They were involved in robotics, very technology interested students. Nick Asmus and Gordon Smith. Nick was from Plympton and Gordon was from Kingston. They were phenomenal. Nick spent 6 hours a day, almost the entire summer, in our back room repairing Chromebooks. He enjoyed it. It was air conditioned. He loved it. And he didn't seem to understand, though, he's going for AP computer science at school and might have a Google internship next summer. He didn't seem to want to come back and do Chromebooks again. But that worked out well. We were able to really accomplish a lot K to 12, and I'm hoping that we can manage to continue that going forward. Getting to the technology department, we did institute a ticketing system last year. This is a system that we've had available for a while. It's not something we paid for. It's something that we kind of developed on our own. And it's been very instrumental in really helping us maintain track of all the repairs, maintain track of all the requests. The first month of school, we were seeing between 60 and 80 requests a day, K to 12. That students and staff. Well, a lot of it was just, I forgot my password, so it was, hey, my room's moved around and I moved my printer and now it doesn't work, that type of thing. And then there were other ones that took a little longer. So that is a system that's been very useful for us. We are beginning the budget building process. This year we've met with the administrators and have worked with them to get a process in place where if teachers want something for their classroom, rather than just putting it in the budget hoping they get it, anything that's technology goes through us first. Not so we can say, no, you don't need it, but so we can say, okay, this is something we can make work here. No, this isn't something that we can make work in the buildings, things like that. This year, K to 12, our E-rate reimbursement topped $93,000, which is huge. We actually maxed out our E-rate for Category 2 services, which is hardware and licensing. At Silver Lake, we used up all of our 5-year money. Fortunately, this coming year, E-rate process, we started a 5-year cycle, so that will be back. Some of the things that we're working on now, we just put in Archive Social, which is, the state requires us to archive electronic communication for 7 years. Traditionally, that meant emails. Now it means anything you post on social media has to be archived for 7 years. Anything that's posted by, say, a teacher or an official account. If it's a parent doing it and it's part of a PTO fundraiser, not through a Silver Lake account, we're not worried about it. But anything that's official, now we get to keep that for 7 years too, in case someone wants to know what we did for our pie fundraiser 6 years ago. We also signed on with EverFi. I know for those of you who aren't familiar, EverFi is an organization. It's funded entirely by donations and grants from corporations or the state. And they provide free curriculum resources to K-12 schools. These resources are mainly computer-based. They show up in a series of lessons that can be 10 to 20 minutes, 3 to 4 lessons per package. And they address some of the non-traditional ELA, science, math things. For example, they have the Compassion Project, lesson plans for teaching empathy and compassion in the lower grades, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. They do STEM career exploration, entrepreneurial, investing basics, alcohol education, prescription drug education. This is all free, it's not costing the district anything, and we're working now on populating teachers and classes into it so we can roll it out. So if a teacher decides to use it as part of the curriculum, they have their login already and their student rosters are already in there so that they don't have to go through the work of actually setting up their classes. We also use Securely for our web filtering, and that filters anything in the building as well as the take-home Chromebooks for our one-to-one initiative are filtered when they're off-site. One of the features Securely has is it does reporting. So if a student is searching for something inappropriate, it will report back to us. So last year we had a couple of cases where students are, I'm having the worst day, I want to die, and they search for that. Or the easiest way to commit suicide. It reports back, it notifies administrators what's going on. And we just completed an audit with them where they're going to report back to us trends and suggestions for improving the reporting capability, improving the accuracy, and best ways of notifying people, say when an administrator isn't sitting on their email. Because that doesn't always happen during school day.
Steve, can I ask you, how fast do you get that reporting?
It's pretty quick.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. We also this year worked on the safety and security grant with our superintendent, and that grant was awarded. We're in the process of hopefully working on completing it. We just recently received the new camera server. At Silver Lake, our camera server that we had and is still in place is overloaded. It's beyond capacity, so there are times when the video glitches or doesn't necessarily report everything we would want it to see. And also as part of that, we're adding new cameras in areas that are underserved. The access control piece has been ordered, the company doing it. Again, the economy's rate has been straight out trying to get installs. Not Silver Lake related, but at Kingston, we finally got the access control in at KES. So that is now entirely off the old Stanley system. And the new camera server is in there and running as well.
Steve, without giving away too much sensitive information, people with password protected access can see through the cameras remotely as well, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Police departments have been granted access, first responders. The system does log access so that we are aware if someone might be using it inappropriately. That has not happened, just to be clear, but because it is on a secure portal and secure access password protected.
Perfect, thank you.
We also have moved forward even more with our virtual app delivery or virtual desktop project at Silver Lake. This is us allowing us to deliver our Windows applications to Chromebooks for the one-to-one. We are actually sitting down and meeting with teachers on the PD day, November 5th, to help with the buy-in and help address concerns they've had about learning how to do it on a Chromebook versus learning how to do it on the laptop. But it is being used quite a lot. We were able to increase that from our original 60 licenses to 135 licenses. So,
Which applications are they mostly using?
right now, we've virtualized the Adobe Creative Suite and also our CAD program. AutoCAD.
That's awesome.
So that students who are working, even if they don't use it in school, if they're at home and want to work on homework or finish up a project, they will have full access to that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, to run CAD on a
Yeah.
Chromebook is impossible without
Yeah.
the virtual desktop, so.
It doesn't, as it is on the one-to-one Chromebooks, it doesn't deliver quite the experience we want, but we are, again, we're working on tuning it, and we're going to work with teachers to see what we can do to make it work better for them. One thing that we're particularly excited about, and over the last several years, we've had conversations with the high school administration about setting up a student help desk. There have been some issues where we've had to overcome, trying to figure out logistics mainly of where, who's going to manage, how we're going to do it, but we are making some good progress on that. We think we have a good space now, and we actually now have an offer from Nell, who is actually spearheading a project to fully train a teacher in the curriculum, work with them to get them up and running and deliver it as a 4-credit course.
That's cool.
That's still a work in progress, but it's exciting and it's certainly something that we are hoping to get going. This year, I don't see any major budget impacts. I mean, there will certainly be licensing costs increased, as we'll have to pay for archive social and a few other things that we need to put in place. Next year, we are looking towards the possibility of either leasing or having dedicated fiber run between all of the K-12 buildings so that we can tie ourselves into one network. Right now, pre-E-rate, we spend between $1,400 and $2,400 a month, depending on the building access. Having a fiber line directly connecting us all would allow us to put it all through one access point with backup, so we could dramatically cut our monthly costs on that. We just haven't gotten numbers on the fiber that say, oh yeah, we'd actually pay for that in 10 years.
Steve, is there any fiber on the lines outside of the building that we could purchase or lease?
We believe so, yes, because all our buildings run fiber internet now.
Okay. So we're already connected to that pathway, we would just need to get switched on.
We just need, well, we need to have a dedicated line, either dark fiber or leased fiber, so that we could do what we prefer to do. Going forward on that, some school districts have actually, once they've gotten that in, they've actually been able to set up data centers and lease back to the towns, say internet access or server storage or backup storage. So they've actually been able to provide services the town would normally pay for outside, back through the school. As you increase your internet bandwidth, the cost for that bandwidth drops dramatically.
Decreases, yeah.
So that things like that. And again, we're not there yet, but these are things we're looking to the future to try and, what can we do to both make our network more robust and also perhaps provide a service back to the town that would end up saving them money.
The potential regionalization of our internet access through the schools for the towns,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yes.
I heard that.
So we're looking at that. That is likely not a budget issue for next year, but it's something we are exploring.
Interesting.
We are at Silver Lake going to look at starting to replace classroom devices. The PCs in the classrooms are getting a little older. The year after that, we're going to have to start looking towards a projector project again. I can't believe it's already getting to that time, but it is. And we are looking at some infrastructure improvements that we'll probably be funding either through capital plan or other methods.
Can I ask you guys a quick question? So if, when you say that, I understand what you mean by a projector project, because you can't go backwards on this one. But, that being said, do we just skip over a projector project and go straight to smart monitors and don't have projectors in classrooms anymore?
That is
Wi-Fi or something?
That is a possibility. Again, we're looking at what is being used and how it's being used. The smart monitors are coming in more expensive than projectors at the moment. Some teachers love the concept. Other teachers are saying, if you put that in the center of my room and it dies, not only have I lost the whiteboard and have their view and projector, but I've also lost my monitor. And I've lost the center of my room as a teaching space.
So it's more of a conversation.
Pardon me?
It's more of a conversation to see what
Exactly.
benefits each individual classroom or each individual subject.
Right now, the projectors in the classrooms we can replace for about $650 a piece. The monitors, probably in the $2,500 to $3,000 range. Now, those prices are dropping. The abilities they have are increasing. There's going to be a point where we say, yes, but what you can do with this is so much more. It's got a 50,000 hour life expectancy. I can't promise you won't get the one that'll die, but it's unlikely.
We'll just go back to overhead view graphs at a certain point, right? Transparency sheets, yeah.
You should see how the kids
I don't even
react when
think
you
my kids
actually
know what that
bring
is.
those out nowadays.
One of the other,
Really?
Yeah.
one of the other things we're looking at classroom devices is it necessary now for most teachers to have a Windows PC or would a Chromebook? Device running Chrome as the OS instead of Windows, you still have access to full Google Suite. with most things done online, is the Windows device going to be overkill for what is done in the classroom? And then at that point, we say, do we just issue Chromebooks? They plug into the projector when they want to use it. It's really a project that we're working on, trying to decide what's going to best suit us next year versus what's going to suit us 2 years from now or 3 years. Yes.
You talked about having the interns over the summer.
Mhm.
Has anybody come to you asking about an independent study?
They have not. And that is certainly a possibility. I will say that one of the obstacles we'd have to overcome is we are not often in one place for very long.
That was very diplomatic.
I tend to be more in the elementary schools because right now Plympton and Halifax are not as well served as I'd like to see them. Our network administrator will be in whatever building is having a problem. And our techs at Silver Lake, again, bounce between here and there. Having an independent study would be something I would certainly like to do, but I also can't say, okay, you're going to be here from 8 to 2 every day, or 8 to 10 every day if it's just a period. I can't say I'm not going to have a crisis in Kingston that I have to be at. But again, if something like that were to come up, we'd look at it and see if we could make it work.
Good.
Anything else for us tonight, Steve?
I think that was pretty much the points I wanted to cover.
Okay, so just to summarize some of the budgetary implications, it seems like this year, there's no big asks. It's going to be some of the site licenses and some general maintenance and replacement of some.
I'm not looking for more than 20 to 30% increase.
It's honest.
Thank you. In the coming years, we're going to be looking at replacing some of the classroom computers, a projector project, or at least a study into how we want to share on a screen, on a wall, on a smart TV, data with students in larger groups. And looking at the fiber project, which would interconnect all of our schools and potentially give us some options to reach back to the towns in a cooperative manner. Is that right?
Initially, what I would see the fiber project doing is giving us more abilities to manage our internet access and reduce the cost of the school.
Mm-hmm.
Going forward from that point, we could certainly approach the towns and say, look, we can do this for you. In Halifax, it would be a matter of getting fiber run across the street to Town Hall. In Plympton, it would require a little more fiber stream.
Right, right. Understood. But it just, again, great stewardship of the department, and we appreciate all your efforts. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
I appreciate your patience.
Oh.
Long night. So next up I have our October 1 enrollment, and this year we are in lovely orange. And for those of you who don't know, Lisa picks colors for each year, and the calendar always matches our enrollment thing. So we are orange this year, which is great. So a couple things just to point out, and I am going to pick up my pace just because I'm going to try to keep your attention and move along. So I'm just going to really quickly summarize. Halifax is down 22 students this year on the elementary level. Kingston is up 25 students on the elementary level. And Plympton, which is totally astounding, is up 27 students on the elementary level, which is an astounding number.
It's like 14%.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Overall, the elementary is up 30%. The middle school this year is down 11 students. The high school is down 10 students. Our tuition students are up 10. However, 8 of them are our Pathways program. So it's the first time, if you notice, we have a grade 13. So that's our students ages 18 to 22. If you flip the chart over, and this is what John Tucker always called an eye chart. I just want to point out what those impact of those numbers have on assessments. Carl's not going to faint because he already saw this presentation at the elementary level. But I did give him a magnet tonight, so I'm sure it's all going to be okay. So Halifax for assessments went down, which Charlie spoke a little bit about. Halifax has been going down steadily if you look across. The numbers I'm talking about are right in the middle, just so you know where I'm at. So last year Halifax was 31.4% of Silver Lake. This year they will be 30.6%. So it's an 0.8% drop. That's actually quite substantial in terms of the impact it will have. Unfortunately for Kingston, they went from 56.3% up to 57.1%. Again, the 0.8 Halifax lost, unfortunately Kingston inherited. Plympton stayed exactly the same because on the secondary level, their numbers stayed the same. Their growth is on the elementary level, okay? So that the impact that will have on the budget means Halifax's assessment number will be lower, and again, it started at 34.2 in 2016, down to 30.6. Kingston went from 54.4 in 16 to 57.1, and Plympton went from 11.4 to 12.3. So again, Kingston, unfortunately for Kingston, will be paying the higher percentage of our assessments. The bottom numbers are the shared cost percentages, and what that is are the budget, the people who are in my office mostly. It's Jill, it's myself, it's Christine Healy, it is also Melissa Farrell, and those of you who made the meeting, the joint meeting, a week or so ago. I don't remember when it was. Whenever,
okay. I don't either.
It was recently. We moved 3 positions out of Silver Lake into shared costs because their jobs are shared costs. It was our accountant, our network manager, and our student information systems. So they actually do the work of all 4 districts. So it's more appropriate that they're in shared cost. So that will just change that a little bit. So on the shared cost percentages, again, Halifax has been winning. They went from 32.9 down to 31.2, so that's a decrease of 1.7. Kingston didn't take the entire hit this time. They went from 56.3 to 56.7, so only a 0.4 increase. Plympton, unfortunately, was the winner on this one. Again, remember they had 27 students, which is huge for Plympton. Huge, it's just absolutely huge. They went from 10.8 to 12.1%. So Plympton is going to be paying a larger percentage of the shared cost of the, again, running my office.
But again, we'll be paying a larger percentage because we're servicing more students.
Correct, correct. So these are, this is data that is of great interest to the towns. I have given this to Carl, and if I had thought about it, I would have given one to Charlie. Would you make sure he gets one?
I gave it to him.
You gave it to him? Great. Okay, thank you. And then we'll have to make sure Plympton gets one afterwards. So this is important information as we're building the budget because it helps the towns to know and be prepared for the impact on their assessments. So next up, we have the budget timeline and discussion. So I started doing this when I became superintendent, was putting together sort of a planning schedule. We have already met with the town of Kingston with their budget advisory. We did that in September. Eric joined me for that. And yeah, just Eric. You were there. Yeah, too many meetings.
Right.
We've been spending a lot of quality time together.
We've been very busy.
We have been very busy. And so we got a sense of where Kingston is at. Charlie talked this evening about Halifax's perspective on our budget. I think this is going to be a year that is going to be very difficult. I think it's going to be something that we're really going to have to think about some of our decisions as we're building our budget. I think the impacts on the towns, I know Jason's probably going to talk a little bit about the state money coming in, so I'll let you do that. But it's going to be a difficult year for the budget. I have no doubt. We had Steve present on the technology, which I really appreciate. Next month, at our next meeting, we'll have Marie Grable come in and she'll talk about some of our special education programs. I also invited Megan Aronholtz, our food service director. I thought that she would maybe be well received. We at this point are paying her salary out of the budget, and then the food service program is run as a revolving program. You may remember we made that change
2 years.
3? 2?
2, I
2 years
think.
ago? Okay, 2 years ago. At this point, the program is doing very well, so I'll let her share the good news with you. And hopefully we can start looking at the food service program going forward. She's doing a great job for us. January is when we'll actually be doing the first actual presentation. Michaela and Dan and Jim will be submitting budgets to me hopefully by Veterans Day. We're trying to move it up a little bit this year. Usually we did Thanksgiving. The reason we're doing that is it's a little bit more of a tight time frame. If things move along with the new superintendent, it will be sort of an intriguing time. We'll all be a little bit busy. So we're hoping to be able to get that forward. Usually this time of year, I start asking if there are some areas that you are particularly interested in, making sure I include in the budget. I personally have 3 things I would like to discuss, but I can either do it before or after your call. What's your preference?
You have the floor.
I have the floor. Fair enough. Thank you. So even though I believe it will be a very austere budget, there are 3 areas that I am very concerned about. Well, 2 in particular that I'd like to advocate for. One is our middle school resource officer. That position is outside of our budget. I would love to try to find a way to work with the towns to keep the position outside of our budget, very much like the Kingston police officer. But it is something that, as things have changed with vaping and some choices that some of our students are making and some of the trauma they're experiencing at home, we really need the support. We really need the support. So last year we fought the good fight. It was close, but not quite close enough. Plympton did come through, and again, with Plympton's support, we're able to have a middle school resource officers for 8 hours a week. Not adequate, but well appreciated. And we truly appreciate Plympton's willingness to work with us. So I would love to work with whoever is interested, available, to try to continue to move this forward. I truly believe putting a police officer in our budget is not the way to go. Remember, we're 180 days. Police officers work year-round. It's a very complex thing to figure out what is the actual amount. You have insurance, you have so many other things that are not within the school's purview, besides which we have no ability to supervise. I have no authority. So they are police officers, they are not my employees. So for many reasons, I believe it makes the most sense to continue to keep them outside of our budget. I would just love to have more support. Again, Kingston is fully funding the high school resource officer, a full-time position. Kingston is also funding 8 hours a week at the elementary level, which they just started this year. Plympton at this point is funding 8 hours at the middle school. What we asked for was 50% of a person time frame. I don't know what the proper way of saying that is. Plympton came through with theirs. Halifax, it was close, but we were unable to get the vote on our side. So I don't know if anybody is interested. You're welcome to approach me later now, whatever, but I feel very strongly we need to have that additional security in middle school.
And just from the perspective of an individual member, I had spoken with the finance committee of Halifax and said that we would reach back out to them in the fall about this position. So I'm with you in advocating, continuing for this, and again, invite all school committee members who are interested in pressing forward with this. the support for the resource officer at Plympton's town meeting was unanimous. So it was not a single down vote on it. And I also believe that it was conveyed to us quite clearly that the town of Halifax also understood the purpose and the rationale behind having a resource officer. Again, it was more of a mechanics and a methodology question. And we ran out of time to come to consensus. So at this point, we still have time to
And
reach out.
the warrant that you signed tonight is for the resource officer. So we figured out the methodology that works for Plympton. So it comes through us because you voted the position, but Plympton is paying Kingston. We're signing off on letting Plympton know, yes, they work these hours, please pay them. So the methodology works. So that is one position. The other position is one that is a shared cost position. I am bringing this up at all the buildings at this point in time, and that is for a nurse leader. We are one of the few districts that do not have any sort of oversight of our nurses by a qualified nurse. So for instance, the nurses enter their data, their medication, their dosages, the student information into a program called SNAP. I do not have access to SNAP. Michaela doesn't have access to SNAP. Dan doesn't have access to SNAP. The reason is because of FERPA. You know, we're not a medical professional, and even if we had access, to be honest with you, I'm not sure I would necessarily know what I was looking at. So we realize at this point in time, with all the changes, with everything that has been happening, it is a position that I feel very strongly we need to have for the safety and security of our students, as well as making sure our nurses have the protections they need in terms of someone that can help keep them informed of required policies, of required procedures. My image or my goal would be to start the position as a 0.5 position. It would go into shared cost. What that means is, I'm just going to pick a number, okay? Let's say the person was $40,000. As a shared cost position, Silver Lake is 50% of any shared cost position. So Silver Lake, it would have a $20,000 impact on your budget, okay? The other 50%, the other $20,000 is split between Halifax and Plympton. Plympton's about 33-ish percentage, and Plympton's about that 16-17%. It is not a huge financial impact on any district, but on the importance of the position and the safety and security it would provide to our students, to our families, to our nurses, I believe it's money that is well spent and actually overdue. Some of you may remember, we have to sign every year a medication disbursement. When the kids go on field trips, the nurse has to be able to allow someone to give the medication. We have had issues over the last several years because we are so poorly staffed with nurses. Remember, we only have one nurse at the high school, and we have over 1,000 people. So by adding a nurse leader, it helps in terms of our impact, and the nurse leader can have some oversight and responsibility on the secondary level. So for many reasons, it's a position that I feel very strongly about. Again, not high impact financially, but high impact on their quality, I think.
Joy, would the nurse leader be providing any medical services, like, you know, if they were housed at the high school, like, would they also serve in a nurse capacity or really only in a supervisory capacity?
So I don't know that they would be housed at the high school, I'm sorry if I
Or-
implied that,
no,
but
just
they would
in general.
float around. What the image is, and we've started looking at some job descriptions, I'm trying to be very optimistic here, is if we had a sub out, we have a terrible time getting subs. By the way, that's the other thing, I'm gonna have to increase sub costs again. We can't buy subs. I mean, we really can't buy a sub nurse. It's ridiculous. We've had to keep going to this sub service, nursing sub service, and it's over $300 for a sub nurse, but you have to have a nurse in a building. Or you should always have a nurse in the building, especially in the elementary level. So if we had a time where the sub nurse was our nurse leader was available, that person could potentially step in also as a sub. So I know different districts run it differently, but that's one way I view it.
I'm just going to add, and I said this at our elementary school committee meeting on Monday, I am going to push for a full-time, not a half-time person because, and again, I agree, I think we need, this person would be doing so many things, but providing oversight to 6 nurses, filling in as a sub when necessary, looking at state laws, making sure that we're adhering and following the laws, and providing that completely missing oversight of the nurses to make sure that they're following our policies and the state laws, and looking at, they have records that they're supposed to keep of when they receive medication from a parent, when it's dispersed, that sort of thing. And we need that close oversight. And in my opinion, that's such an important, and safety of our students is paramount, right? And this is an area where we don't have oversight. And unless I'm mistaken, all the research that I've done, if you're in a hospital, the state comes in and investigates and does an audit of the hospital, and they look at all your records. There's 0 state inspections in school nurses looking at documentation to make sure that they're following the law. So we need to provide it ourselves until we get to a point where the state does do something like that, like they do with hospitals. Because more and more, 10, 15, 20 years ago, we didn't really give out that many medication, maybe ADHD, but now there's so many kids on medication daily or as needed. So there's a lot more, and the laws just haven't caught up completely.
What are the guidelines for sort of number of nurses per student? I know there are some, it may not be laws, but
It is antiquated. They generally look at schools if they prefer to have more than one nurse if it's more than 500 students. That's sort of a general. But a lot of it depends on your student population. If you happen to have a student population that does not have a lot of students on medication or does not have a lot of diabetic students, it changes a little bit. But generally, the number 500 is the one I hear kicking around most often.
And that's a kicking around number to a certain extent. There's some Mass General laws that state you have to have 1 nurse for a district.
Yeah, we have, there's lots of school systems that there's small elementaries, a nurse might bounce between them. There's a lot of iterations. At the high school, we only have 1 nurse, but she does have a full-time aide who does all the logging, who's, is very instrumental. So, there's iterations schools come up with. A nurse, to find a nurse for a school is difficult. Needless to say, if they're in a hospital, they can make a huge amount more money. So part of my logic for starting with half-time is, first of all, to learn to see what the position would be, but also, if there was someone retired, it might be something that someone who's already sort of had their career, this might be a way that they're very experienced, they know what they're doing, it might be a way of beginning it and finding the proper person. So, but we would love to have anything.
Well, so my one thought is I think I would be concerned about giving the person sort of a nurse role as well as a nurse leader role, only because the nurse role could completely take over, because I feel like there's probably so much need for assistance with our already, overburdened nursing staff. Like I know in Marshfield, the nurse leader does not stand in for the nurse. Generally, but I think, I can see that it would be really beneficial to have that, but I think it could, it could kind of come back to bite you too. So I guess that would be my only concern, is to make sure that it's structured so that, the nurse leader responsibilities absolutely happen, and then the other stuff kind of can happen if there's time, because I can see that it could take over.
Just for size comparisons, in Marshfield is the nurse leader, because we're relatively the same size. Is that a full-time position?
It is.
It is.
Yeah, but there's 7 buildings.
Right.
So.
Which is pretty much where we are.
No, yeah, I guess that's true. But yeah, no, you're right. So if we're.
Okay, so Eric?
The only thing I was going to just argue that point about making sure that they're not taking nursing responsibilities. In Kingston, we had one out. We had a really tough time getting subs
Right.
this past spring. But if this person could move in, I mean, I get it, they need to have their management
I
duties.
just want to make sure it would be controlled somehow.
Yeah, I mean,
you know?
the problem is when you have somebody coming in that doesn't know the kids and doesn't know,
Right.
they have no knowledge of anything that's going on, because we're getting them through a service.
Right.
And they could be a different one Monday and a different one Tuesday. There's
I
no
just don't want to see us
continuity.
say we're hiring a nurse leader and end up hiring another nurse, because that's what we need.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like I want to
Right.
make sure that we know what we need, and
Yeah,
that that's what we're
there's-
hiring, so.
I had looked at Falmouth last spring, and Falmouth has a nurse manager with some pretty interesting job description, and Joy has looked around at other school districts.
A lot of times it's a stipend on a current
Yeah.
nurse in the
Right.
building. So, you know, as I said, there's many iterations, that, you know, again, it's a position that is critically important. And, you know, I'm just beginning the conversation, just letting you know some of my initial thoughts.
Just because I'm getting flavor from the committee, can I get an indication from each of you if you support this as a part-time or a full-time role? Just so Joy has some more latitude with her budget process as she starts to build this out. Mike, do you want to look at both? Do you have any strong feelings one way or the other?
I agree with Laura's comments on it. It's either the leader or it's another nurse, right? I mean, and I would think it would be a full-time position.
Okay. Paula?
I actually echo Mike completely.
Okay.
This is the first I'm really hearing about this, so I don't know part versus full, 'cause I don't know the job description. But I'm 100% behind anything that's improves safety, quite frankly.
Fair enough, thank you. Gordon?
If it's just a management piece, I could see the half, but if it's gonna have a job description where it's more interaction than just managing the process, then I could see a full-time position.
I'm with Gordon on that.
I'm with
That's definitely how I feel.
Leslie Ann?
I'm with Chris on this. I'd actually like, I haven't really processed this, but I'd like to maybe see a little bit more data on maybe the amount of calls, the amount of interactions, these, you know, some level of severity of the different levels of interactions, and see, I don't know, I mean, I just think I'm kind of flying blind on it, to be honest.
Fair enough, just getting a straw poll, basically. Yeah. Ed?
Nobody's gonna like it, but you need two. You need a full-time nurse, another nurse to be the ready one to go off to wherever you're missing somebody, unfortunately, and you need somebody to be effectively administrative. I know nobody's gonna like hearing that because of money, but it's the truth. Because once you get the first one, you're still gonna need the second one. And no matter how you say it, if you get the administrative person in there, they're gonna be doing the nursing job.
So I already said that I'm for full-time, but I think part of their job description should also potentially be fill-ins, but obviously not, maybe just a certain percentage a week. But in my opinion, they should be hands-on direct supervisors of these nurses, evaluating them based on nursing practices, not teaching practices. So, you know, the problem is principal, superintendent, nobody can really oversee or manage a nurse, other than, are you here, how many complaints do you have? But they're not nurses, they're not health professionals. So this person should be managing those people and hands-on and making sure that all the policies are being implemented correctly. But also potentially could also work with our health plans and, you know, vaping issues, working with the police liaison officers in all of the schools that we have them, you know, to work on health-related issues, but also keeping abreast of what's going on statewide in terms of any laws related to student health. There's a lot.
Mr. Dewey.
So one of the things that I'm in the Allied Health program at Silver Lake. One of the things that we were talking about today was having almost like a co-op with the nurse at the school, and then this would alleviate some of the pressure off of her in order to, you know, get the less of a workload. But I feel like having a nurse that would be floating around when nurses have to take different days off, I feel like that should be a full-time, and it's really, you have to have a nurse.
I think that this position needs to be a full-time position. I think we need to be pretty careful about how we define the role. You know, Ed, I don't think you're wrong. I think that we need to look at the data though and see how much money we're spending on these high-cost nurse substitute factories to see what we would pay if we had a floater
Public school
here.
education, I've said it before, it's the most expensive thing for any community to have to have.
Absolutely.
And they don't have a choice about it.
No.
They don't.
Right, but it would be interesting to see comparison-wise if we're spending $300 a day on someone who's not invested in our town, who's not necessarily comfortable with our students, who our students aren't necessarily comfortable with either. What is the cost benefit of having a floater who could go around and help out in all of our schools, but also have someone potentially be a nurse leader? So I think it's a valid point, Ed. Leslie Ann.
I'm just wondering if we, to further this discussion, maybe just to move on to our other things too, is next time we talk about this, can we see some data?
I'm trying to figure out.
How many days are
what
we
you-
using a sub? What's it costing us? How many incidents do we have? What are the level of severity of incidents?
What do you mean incident?
How many, when a kid goes and visits the nurse, is it, you know, a high, medium, or low situation? You know, is it a crisis? Is it something unusual, or is it a maintenance situation? You know, I don't know. I'm not a healthcare provider.
Do you want data to justify the head nurse position or to justify 0.5 versus 1.0?
Both probably.
Because I think we can speak to the fact right here, right now, that the position is needed, just based on state mandates and oversight, and the fact that we just had a superintendent tell us that nobody on the administrative team has any oversight over medical professionals in our buildings who distribute medications to students. I don't know.
Yeah,
what
and I'm
data
not arguing for or against it. I just want to see some data. I mean, nursing has changed quite a bit since I was in high school. I mean, to be honest, we used to go to visit the nurse for reasons that seem completely superfluous now, correct?
Yeah.
Remember? We all know what I'm talking about. You all don't, but we do. But I also know situations where, you know, and I'm not suggesting we ever go down this path, but in other parts of the country where teachers also serve as nurses. And I'm not suggesting we do that. I just want to see some data to see. I don't want to go on a feeling. I want to go in some data.
Okay. I think the data to show that we need one will be very easy.
I'm sure it will, and I think our communities need to understand that data as well.
Agreed. Thank you. All right. And one
So
more
the-
item.
One more item. The last item is something that is not unexpected, and I think our new student rep will probably advocate strongly for, is when we built the allied health program, if you remember, Elliot told us that he would be needing a second allied health teacher. The allied health program is our most enrolled program out of all of our CTE programs. It is very popular. It has been incredibly well received. We have a fantastic teacher. She's doing just an absolutely great job. This is something that we knew would be coming. The plan, or Elliot's preference would be, Mr. Glass's preference, would be to try to get that position in next year. He is currently in the process of applying for Chapter 70.
Chapter 74.
Thank you.
It's all right.
As soon as I said it, I'm like, I'm on the wrong number. It's getting late, sorry.
None of us
Chapter
knew.
74 status. That will give us close to $4,000 more per student if he gets it in and if it's approved. So that approval will basically fund the position. Okay, the cost of the differential will fund the position, if that makes sense to people who sort of understand the background math of it all. If it is a position that, again, when we built the program, I don't think there was any question that we all sort of saw the writing on the wall. What I don't think I realized or expected, I mean I did in my heart, but I'm floored, is how popular this program is. I mean, not everybody can even get in that wants to be in the program. So if you don't mind, I'm going to actually let our new student rep tell us how wonderful the program is, but sort of quickly, because I think they're getting really tired.
Yeah. So it's a phenomenal program. It's really cultivated everyone that wants to go into nursing and want to have a career in nursing. I mean, personally, like I do a lot of research on my own, and then once this program came out, I didn't apply for it at first, but I was able to get into it the second year. And it's honestly, it's been almost like life-changing, because you're learning so much information, and it's information that you're gonna have to know when you're going into the medical field anyways. So it's truly great.
And Elliot shared with us an astounding statistic. He asked students after they went through and tested out all of the different programs, which one they thought was the coolest, most interesting, and over 50% of the students replied allied health.
So again, those are the three areas that I just wanted to let you know that, we haven't really sat down, we haven't really had our beginning budget meetings. These are my personal preferences or my personal requests that I believe the district really needs. So just the beginning of the process. I don't know if anybody wants to share anything else. I do realize it's getting late. We're welcome to share tonight, or if you'd like to email me, whatever you'd like to do. By next month, I will have spent some good quality time with Michaela and Dan and Jim, and begun the actual process of putting the budget together. So far, it does not look like this is going to be a big year for retirements. I am glad in one sense because we're keeping our great quality teachers. On the other hand, that means we will not be providing savings. So that is something that can often be a helpful offset to the budget. This does not look like it's going to be a year where we're going to have those savings. So I think that's all I had on the budget. And then really quickly, I don't think it's in your packet. I don't believe it is. Oh, that's the next one. We received a lovely note from the town of Kingston, and it's from all 5 selectmen. Dear Superintendent Blackwood, the town of Kingston is deeply appreciative for the volunteer work that has been provided by students at Silver Lake School to better this community. Specifically, the work at the Grays Beach Pavilion deck and the recycle bins at Okochensky Field. We know the Silver Lake carpentry program is constantly doing carpentry work for the town, and it does not go unnoticed. This community is lucky to be the benefactor of your volunteerism. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and it's signed by all 5 selectmen. So I just wanted to really share this with you because we really tried very, very hard to work with all the towns and to do projects. And I know it's certainly the easiest in Kingston because of distance, but we have done many projects in all the towns, and I am a huge advocate for what our comprehensive high school is able to offer into the communities. And I believe all the communities also really appreciate it. The last thing I have is we were picked again to host the baking performance exams. We have 2 fantastic chefs, and we were once again picked to host the baking exams. So I think it's actually in your packet. I just wanted to recognize that it's because of the opportunities that we have at our school that, again, that we're recognized in a way like this. Particularly Jill Bernardo, who's the one who is instrumental in making this happen. And I think that is all I have.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. Moving on to new business. This is an item that I would like to bring up at a date when we have more time to pay attention to it and more energy to pay attention to it. It's a discussion for looking into dual enrollment opportunities for our students, but I think tonight might not be the night for us to begin that conversation. So moving on, unless there's any questions or concerns about us, skipping over, moving on to the superintendent's search. So I'd like to start by apologizing for the amount of emails that you've been receiving from me. We're trying to work through one of the most important roles that we have as school committee members, and that's trying to find a superintendent who can come to us in committee, and the people who went through the preliminary screening. I can tell you it was a very heartfelt and profound letter, and I appreciated the time that candidate took to send it to us. I will share it with any of you privately, since it's of a personal nature, if you so require. We are moving forward with our 2 finalists for superintendent candidacy. We're conducting site visits. That's when we go to the district of the individual individual, and we hear from some stakeholders about how they've conducted themselves in their current roles and how people can view them making that step to superintendent of Silver Lake Regional Schools. One site visit was conducted today. Another site visit will be conducted on November 5th. And then the candidates will also be coming to visit us. And that's an opportunity really for them to go to different stakeholder groups, to go to the different buildings and introduce themselves to teachers and principals, potentially PTO members and parents, members of the community, and most importantly, our students as well. We will be having interviews which are open and public. The first interview will be November 12th at 6 o'clock. It will be in the high school. We will be interviewing a candidate, and that would be our business for the evening. We will not go into deliberations on that evening. We will have another interview on November 13th at 6 o'clock at the high school. At the conclusion of that interview, we do have posted that we have the option to go into deliberations and potentially vote through a candidate that night. If we are not ready to, or we can't come to consensus that evening, we've also posted for November 14th at 6 o'clock at the high school for the purposes of deliberation and a vote. So it's a quite packed schedule. I am going to be reaching out to you all and to members of Union 31, requesting volunteers to make phone calls and reference checks. I know some of you have already volunteered to do that, and I appreciate it. It's not legal for us to give that to the administration, and our consultants can't do it either. It is our responsibility to reach out and do those reference checks. So please expect to see a couple more emails from me coming through. But as of right now, that's all I have to report to you on the superintendent search, unless you have a question. Carl.
Because of the Kingston town meeting on the 12th, was there serious consideration in not doing an interview on that night so that people could go to both the public interview and the town meeting?
Carl, thank you for asking about that. There was careful consideration and deliberation on the dates, but because of our timeline that we had established, there were very few dates with some holidays and some other professional commitments on behalf of our semifinalists. We do have potentially the opportunity to look at moving that up, but we also have committee members who can't make it here prior to 6 o'clock in the evening. I will do due diligence to allow my Kingston colleagues the opportunity to come to the floor and ask questions as early in the interview process as possible. But there was no other possible way for us to meet our timeline and not hit the 12th as well. Yes,
What are the next steps for the committee? I know, with the initial round, we, came up with questions and things like that. So will there be more information coming our way about sort of how the interviews will work and sort of what will we bring forward to that?
Right, so members of the site visits do receive a packet of information to try and make sure that it's an equitable process and the similar questions are asked of all candidates. That was distributed to the members of the team that met today, and it was also will be sent out to the members of the team going on November 5th.
And those questions came from where?
Those questions were suggested questions from MASC. Our consultant provided it to us. It also took into account some of the questions that had already been asked in the preliminary screening process. And again, we have the ability to ask follow-up questions whenever a candidate or someone we're interviewing brings up information. So there is a protocol to follow, but there is some flexibility within it as well.
And that, so
same with the calling for the reference checks. So those of you who end up making reference checks, there is protocols. We can't ask personal information. It's illegal, it's unethical. We have to stay to the professional characteristics of that individual. So again, that's been provided to us by MASC. It's been vetted through the processes that they've led before.
So my question is really about the public interviews. I think there was some discussion that anyone could ask a question. Is there information that would be coming from MASC about us suggesting questions and having those. My big, the reason I'm asking is that I want to make sure that the questions that we have are not just what I feel like asking, what you feel like asking, what you feel like asking, but that we have a comprehensive set of questions to ask each candidate.
Didn't we get that last month, the handout?
We
Or is that-
we did receive a handout, but I also have digital copies. of
But-
the
and that
handouts.
has
But
all those
I think Laura
questions.
wants to drill down deeper into
Well,
more
just having been
personalized
part
for
of,
us.
well, having been part of the, and I don't know how much I can talk about the screening process.
I think you can talk about the process.
Okay, so
yes.
we were all asked 4 questions. Those of us on the screening committee, we all submitted, sort of a primary question and some secondary questions to Jim, and he basically took all the primary questions and we each got to ask a question. He sort of felt that it was important that everybody get to ask a question. And I felt like I didn't care if I didn't ask a question as long as our set of questions were comprehensive. We have a large committee. I'm concerned that when we do the interviews, if the goal is everybody gets to ask a question, we're going to have a lot of overlap, we're going to have some holes, because everybody will have sort of their own thing that they want to ask, which is great, but I want to know what the process is for making sure that the interview questions are comprehensive and efficient.
So I'll reach out to Jim and see if that is an area where he's ever encountered before and what we can do to mitigate that on our own, potentially, if he doesn't have a solution for us.
No, it seems,
It's
are we all
very
just going to
logical
show up and
process.
ask questions, or is there going to be sort of a set of these are the questions? Because the way that we did the screening and the interviews in the first round were,
Right.
we had a set of questions that we asked every candidate.
Right.
And
Right.
I want to make sure that we do that this time around.
Coordinated effort.
But to be even more comprehensive, because I'm not sure that the questions we asked before, it seemed like there could have been some other questions that, there were some questions that maybe overlapped a little and some where maybe we
Right.
could have expanded a little more.
And we all acknowledge the fact that there's always going to be some things that
Yes.
we don't even think of.
Right.
Right? That might become obvious in hindsight, but.
Right. I just want to make sure that it's a really thoughtful process for what the questions are that are asked, just in the interest of
So we
time
can
and
reach back out to
being
Jim
comprehensive.
and we can discuss that.
Okay.
Leslie, Ann?
And then I guess more of a procedural question is, we want to make sure clearly that, we're fair to both candidates. And I guess if we thought about, we're doing this on 2 separate nights, so theoretically, whoever goes first is not going to have the benefit of seeing or hearing the questions, but this person on the second night could tune in and see what the questions are. So I'm just wondering, because I've been through this process before where you set up a series of 5 questions and those the same questions you ask every candidate. So I'm just wondering if there's any thought given to having both interviewed on the same night, just to avoid that situation. Well, as much as you can.
Or don't televise it.
Or don't televise it, but I don't know.
We're not live. And
I'm not,
it's a valid point.
just bringing up a
Yes.
point.
But those of us in public education and high stakes interviews know that sometimes they happen on sequential days or not even necessarily sequential days. And we were in discussion at our union meeting a couple of weeks ago, the date that Joy and I can't remember at this moment. And there seemed to be an indication of how much effort went into each individual interview and how much time could potentially be taken up by each interview and discussing things. And there were some people at the table who said that doing more than one on a night seemed like too much to do and process. That came from our own group. So to hear now, let's maybe look at doing 2 on the same night is a contradiction to the direction that I felt we'd established it at the previous time.
Yep.
And I don't want to change the process that we've established. We've set up dates with candidates. They've rearranged their lives to be here. I believe that Jim tried to coordinate dates with them on an equitable basis. And I'm sure somebody said, I want this date before someone else did. And that's the way these things sometimes happen. But
I don't know. I mean,
it's the process we're taking, Leslie.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like we sit around here for hours on end anyhow, and we do very productive things for a long period of time, and I just want to make sure that we are providing the most equitable process, and you've done such a good job of making that being one of your sort of key points on what you want to do here, and I just don't want to kind of guff it up at the end here I don't need the convenience of not sitting here for 4 hours. I'm okay with it. I don't know how everybody else feels, but if it's lacking, if it's going to give more equity to the process, I think we should consider it.
Mike, then Paul.
They're all valid points, but the time frame is going to be tough, right? The second round is going to be longer. We kept it pretty tight on the first one, and the second one it could run 2 hours, maybe more, on each one because of now the amount of people that are going to be in the room asking questions. I do agree with Lauren because you and I talked about some of the questions, and for the second round, I really think they should be tailored to the district's needs. The first ones are just kind of like, feeling them out, getting their backgrounds, getting their stories. The second set needs to be a little bit more detailed for what we are really looking for in the district. I feel.
Right. And tied to that, tied to what was in the brochure. I didn't necessarily feel that the questions we asked were tied in with what we sort of stated that we were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make sure that that happens in this round.
I'm not saying that we can't. I'm not saying we can't do that. It's just going to be long.
It's going to be long. Yeah.
It's going to be a long night.
Yeah. And not anybody can ask a question, just to clarify. Only members of the school committee can ask questions during the interview process. Just to be clear at that, of the candidates. Okay, Paula, and then Ed?
I understand the concern, but I think as a joint school committee, we agreed to the process. We've set the dates. With all due respect, I think we have to go with what we have established now. I wouldn't want to have done both interviews on the first night, because I think potentially the interviews could be long. We're too far down the path now. We've sent out dates.
We don't have the authority to make that decision.
No, we'd have to reconvene and then rearrange things with the candidates, and I just think we need to move forward the way we are now.
Just wanted to say, Leslie Ann has a very good point. I agree with what she's saying. But I also heed to the body as a whole, what the decision is. But I also have to ask about the questions. I'm fortunate because the questions I had for one of the contestants or applicants doesn't matter anymore. Point is, do I have to get any questions vetted between the rest of us? Or?
Your questions are your questions. I think in order for us to do this in a way that wouldn't violate open meeting, we're going to have to coordinate with Jim, and you're probably going to have to send yours to Jim, and he can compile them, so we're not having deliberation outside of a public meeting in a setting. So,
and my other question is to be perfectly, it doesn't matter anymore, but I should know just in case I'm ever in this situation again. I can tell my question might demand results, counter questions, and I'm just curious. You understand what I'm trying to say?
I think you need to be
Ed,
mindful
Ed,
that
could you
your
repeat that?
questions.
Because Paul or Mike couldn't hear what you said.
Oh,
Too
sorry.
soft for us.
My questions might actually necessitate follow-up questions to the original question.
Yeah,
It's
no.
not just one thing.
We're always allowed to ask follow-up questions.
Okay,
Even if
all right.
your question generates
The
a
same
follow-up
question.
from Gordon.
Yeah.
Follow-ups are a normal part of the
Okay,
interview
all right.
process.
Well, a couple of things we just said here that made me think, I have to give you guys proof of everything that I want.
But
No,
that's how we did the first
Right.
round.
Yeah,
That's how we
yeah,
did the
well-
first round, is the questions were set and we
Yeah.
saved follow-ups for it's very
Yes,
structured.
yeah.
And I haven't heard anything about the structure of the actual interviews, and that's why I'm sort of pushing this.
We've
because-
been working diligently on the process
Okay.
of trying to schedule everything.
Right.
Because
That's
there
gotta happen
was a
first.
point where we were trying to schedule 9 separate events in 3 weeks during school days, trying to avoid Fridays, hopefully for people's sake. It was a lot of pieces. to coordinate and move around, and then make sure we were available to be at those places on those dates, right? So that was the focus at that point. You know, remember that Jim is a consultant working for us, but the rest of us also have other jobs and other commitments. So this is a monumental task.
Right, well, I mean, those of us that were on the screening committee, you know, that was 4 or 5 nights of meetings, you know, very long nights, so, you know, we understand.
Right. So that's where we are. That's why you are seeing all the emails from the coordination, but you haven't necessarily gotten next steps unless you've been part of the next steps at this point. Okay? Any further discussion? All right. So moving on to reports of special committees, SLEA. Thank you for your patience.
No, that's fine. Good evening, everyone. So, John Lay, new SLEA president. So the last time I spoke at the meeting, I said that Megan Rabinovich was planning on staying on, but I guess maybe having a new baby did cause her to reconsider, and she did decide to step down. So I have been elected as the president. We did adopt new bylaws, and we have all new officers, a lot of new members of the board. So the most relevant things for the committee to be aware of is we slightly redefined the roles of some of the officers. So the president is now the primary liaison between the superintendent's office and the school committee, and the building issues are going to be dealt with primarily by the vice presidents. So we don't have a middle school vice president right now, so I am dealing with the building level issues at the middle school. But Melissa Fontaine is going to be the vice president at the high school. David Hurd, the vice president for support staff. And we do have a new treasurer, that's Jessica Drew, and a new secretary, which is Colin Gregory.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Admin review.
So I guess that's me, because I was elected chair of admin review.
I didn't say no fast enough.
So we met tonight to review some shared cost contracts. And will those will be brought up at the union, the joint meeting? Okay, so we'll bring those forward at the next joint meeting.
CTE, Chris?
I have nothing new to report because Michaela Gill did tell you all about the wonderful dinner we had last night, opening of the greenhouse with the students, but we've not had a meeting.
All right. So moving on to chairman's report and correspondence, I think we've addressed the correspondence that came through already. The legislative agents report, I've already mentioned what's happening at the state level. We're not getting included in the Fund Our Future or the Promise Act the way that we had hoped. We did get good response from Rep. Lenatra and Senator DiMacedo trying to come to our aid and acknowledging the needs of our suburban communities. Unfortunately, the tide was against us, and we're looking at potentially just a $35 per pupil minimum increment. What Carl was referencing is the disproportionality of what the state is going to be giving us over the next several years is going to impact our towns disproportionately, because when we bring a very reasonable budget to the town, let's use 2 or 3% as a ballpark, the state is not going to match the growth of our budget to the extent that our budget is going to grow. So every year from here on out, the burden is going to lie more on our towns to come up with the funds for our schools. It's going to create department animosity as we continue to ask for 2 or 3%, and the towns are getting drained of their resources to acknowledge their fire department, their public works department, and other areas of the municipal responsibilities. So, you know, we have some work to do legislatively to get ourselves heard. Luckily, we have 2 good partners up on Beacon Hill. I implore Senator Brady to come on board and work with us a little bit more. But Other than that, last month you guys nominated me to be your delegate for the MASC convention that's happening November 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. But you did not give me any direction on specific ways to vote on the resolutions. In the spirit of time, you could A, tell me to vote my conscience because you trust me, or B, I can go through the names of each one and you can say hold on one, you want me to explain more, and then you can give me explicit direction on how you would like me to vote. Does anybody have a way they would like me to proceed?
I will make a motion that we trust you.
That's an interesting motion.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
You're trusted.
All right, I really, I do appreciate that. Just so you know, there is an item on there for the banning of polystyrene foam in public schools by 2022-2023. I was the author of that resolution. It was my first resolution I've ever brought forth at MASC. It received unanimous support from their delegate resolution subcommittee and their board of directors. But we've also been contacted by some members of the State House who have what they call sister legislation, and they wanted us to know that they are on board as well. There's House Bill 1993 and House Bill 3502 and Senate Bill 1205, all similarly calling for the elimination or the reduction of the use of polystyrene foam, especially in the food industry here in the Commonwealth. And our resolution would call for that elimination to occur in our schools as well. We owe it to our students, we owe it to our environment, and there are alternatives that are coming down in price every single year that we can't neglect any longer. So, thank you for that. Moving on to negotiations.
Before you go there, when are you going to bring up the topic that I suggested to you over email? You said you were going to do that during legislative report. Come on, you can't remember? It's only 9 o'clock.
I remember the California thing.
The vape lawsuit.
Yeah, so, right. So do you want to speak to it?
You said that you tell me. I thought you said there.
Okay, so there are some states attorney generals looking at potentially partnering with school districts to file lawsuits against the vaping industry for the purposeful targeting and the harm done to our students and our population of students of minors. We've talked about vaping a few times over the past couple of years here at this table. We seem pretty committed to trying to support our administrators with whatever they see fit, bringing in resources, talking to students, having our resource officers become a more prevalent part of our kids' lives. How do you feel potentially about us investigating what this lawsuit actually looks like and whether or not we would potentially want to partner in with this? I know this is just a preliminary step. Would you like us to bring forth the lawsuit language so we can examine it and decide whether or not we want to also participate as a voice?
I'd like to see what it looks like.
Yeah?
Sure.
Okay. 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 So we'll bring that forth at the next meeting as an item of new business.
Would you be able to email us that?
I can't email it. I'll check with Fred about can I send you information of a publicly sourced document. If not, I will bring it to the next meeting.
Or send it to me and I can.
Okay, great. All right. Just want to make sure we're.
And just to add to that, I mean, there are 3 different states that are, this is not one place, this is not one demographic. This is a number of different states considering, school districts actually considering doing this or starting the process of doing it.
Right, it's all the way down
to recoup resources and costs and impacts.
Thank you, Leslie Ann, for the gentle reminder.
Sorry, I didn't. My leg's not long enough to kick you under the table, but.
Leslie Ann and I have been together since early this morning.
8:30 to be exact. That's right. Past 12 hours.
How about negotiations?
Did we settle yet?
I have a snarky reply there.
You can just say no.
We met last night, so we'll discuss in executive session.
leave it at that.
You're dreaming now.
Pat?
I was here when the last meeting took
I
place.
know, and I apologize to
That's
that,
all right.
and I did reach out to the executive director to apologize. Because we are pursuing our
I think I
next
understand.
superintendent, we have had to be absent, unfortunately, in our role as board of director members from the Pilgrim Area Collaborative. They can't hold their board meetings, just like we can't hold our school committee meetings without a quorum. Luckily, our board of director members from our neighboring towns have stepped up in knowing that we won't be able to make it to a few meetings in the next few weeks. So thank you Ed, for that, and we appreciate our partners at PAC understanding what we're going through. Policy. I will accept a motion to waive the actual reading of the policies.
So moved. So seconded.
All right, all those in favor of waiving the first read?
The actual reading.
Waive the actual reading. Thank you very much. All right, I will accept a motion to accept the first reading of IKFBA ING-1 JB JLCD.
It's like pig Latin.
Moved.
Moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion about these policies?
Nope, they are highlighted in red, the changes that we've made. They are all ones that went through the policy subcommittee and went through substantial discussions. And I think they are ones that we would like to accept as is.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the first reading of our policies, say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. Revolving funds.
No meeting.
Safer.
Meeting to be scheduled.
Thank you. School start times, I do have a report to make there. California announced a statewide law where all high schools, with few exceptions, have to start after 8 o'clock. Every single high school in the state has to start after 8 o'clock, and every single middle school in the state has to start after 8:30. This is all based on the brain-based research that we all know that is in the best interest of our students. Unfortunately, with a state like ours that has people going in different directions, it's very difficult for individual districts to come to this conclusion. The state of California took it out of the hands of the individual districts and made a state mandate. Ed?
What did that do to the elementary schools? Did that push them back even further or make it?
So
that they
most
had
of the
to get more?
districts moved their elementary schools up, but there were some that did the flips. So
Really?
that was left under local control.
Because I'm just gonna mention that the data also shows that they shouldn't start the elementary kids earlier either, so it's just
There.
So I have a question. There was recently a bill announced where the B word is now going to be illegal in Massachusetts. I don't know if it's going to be passed, but if they can do that, have you heard anything from any of our representatives
Yes.
about doing something like this? with start
California's
times?
move has regenerated
Okay.
interest at the state level. There have been bills over the past several years where the state has taken this up, but then it's been referred back to committee. So there is rumblings at our state house now to see how it works out for California before we make rash decisions. So we're gonna let California be the guinea pig and see how it works out and gather data, and then we'll make a decision as a state. So, treasurer's report.
You're the
No
animal.
warrants?
You're the lady.
No warrants tonight?
Well, just the one.
What?
Just the one.
Yeah,
Just the
Pass it
one?
back.
Just the one.
we're letting
One warrant
Plimpton,
circulating
letting
the
Plimpton
table?
pay. Just leave home.
What's my
$429.72.
time?
Thank you very much for the reading of the warrant into the record. Union 31,
So we met on the 10th.
thank you for that
That's the
date.
date.
Where you been, Mike?
And so we had the four administration's contracts come up, and so we put it on hold for we just had our review meeting, so we'll be bringing those back forth to the Unit 31. The superintendent candidates also were announced there at that meeting, and we're moving forward. So,
Thank you, Mike. Were there any single signature warrants?
No.
All right. So, some future updates coming up. There is an early release day today. Oh, that's great. I hope everyone enjoyed their early
K
day.
through 6.
K6.
K to 6.
November 5th is an in-service day, so students don't have to come to school, but the rest of us do. November 11th is Veterans Day. There's no school. We have some other dates that we brought up at the meeting, the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th, all at 6 o'clock, all at the high school for the purposes of interviewing, deliberating, and potentially voting for our future superintendent. We're then looking forward to November 27th. There is an early release for grades 7 through 12 at 10:45 a.m. Our K to 6 students will be released at noon on that day, no lunch served, so they can enter into their Thanksgiving holiday recess. There will be no school on the Thursday, the 28th, or Friday, the 29th. And our next official school committee meeting for the purposes of talking about Silver Lake Regional School business will be on December 5th. I will now accept a roll call.
One quick thing on the dates, if that's okay. On November 5th, on the in-service day, I just want to report that Michaela and I and Leslie Kalinowski, three of us, Casey Sheehan, are going to be attending a Credit for Life event in Rockland for the morning. So we'll actually get to see one in action before we decide how to adopt it, how they decide to adopt it
That's
here
pretty
for the
cool.
spring.
Thank you for bringing that forward to us. I'll entertain a motion to enter into executive session for the purposes of discussing Silver Lake Education Association contract negotiations pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section A, subsection 21, Paragraph A, Section 3.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's a roll call
Roll
to
call.
enter into executive
Oh,
session.
all right.
Mike?
Yes.
Paula? Chris?
Yes.
Floyd?
Yes.
Leslie?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
And me as well, yes. Thank you, everyone, for your
Thanks.
patience tonight. Appreciate it. You made it.
That's your hair.
Thank you.
Matches your backpack.